Why didn't you invite us?
It was Jordan, probably.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
No.
Okay.
So I was,
Yeah.
so I was like, I would have been there, you know. But he said a good time was had by all, but I told him, you came close to allowing Cinderella to leave with her shoe. And he's like, I know, because I mean, they were down by 12 at the half. So
Yeah,
I
think
guess,
just their entire legs, they kept on missing shots short.
Not bad.
Yeah.
well, here's my question, I guess. When they came back from halftime, they looked in the mirror, their coach should have been back there saying, don't look in the mirror. We are who we are. Don't look in the mirror.
The game also changed substantially about a third of the way through the second half after the
Problem is when I forget.
Florida coach got a technical foul. Right.
Mhm.
Instantly, the next possession called 3 fouls on Houston in one.
Your stuff.
Like instantly caught him up from 3 fouls to 16 fouls. before they left.
Sometimes you gotta tell people, I'm with my team.
Yeah, so, yeah, it seemed like they changed how they were refing the games.
Mhm.
But, I think this was tired.
You gotta adapt. Oh, which case is it? And who is the,
Yeah, she told me not everything about it.
all right, if you'll speak to him. And we'll discuss it. No problem, it
If I get
happens.
moved back to intake, I'll look at it. Oh, man. Well,
Okay.
glad to see you came out of it, probably a little wiser.
No.
Get engaged to her.
Right, right. We're working on the bigger. I gave.
Can you connect that real
Nice
quick?
seeing you.
Yeah.
Again.
No, let me see the file.
Richard Baker.
All right, Edelman, who's on Baker? All right, can you come forward? All right, on this.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. On this case,
That's nice.
on
Works on
Mr. Baker, he has a medical emergency. Yes, counsel? Are you gonna be available, you think?
Just want to see if I can help pay. As long as you know. Sooner I can see it, sooner I go.
All right, you,
So I get put to trial.
if you want to, if you're available, I can recall it for tomorrow, but you'll need to be here exactly at 9. All right, okay. Who are are there any parties here for Baker? All right, so. All right,
There's a whole bunch of them. I'll just wait.
all right. Well, you want to talk to him and see if you can talk to them and tell them what your issue is? And are all the jurors here? Do we know?
I don't know. The band, so stepping out, Judge.
Why not? Because he doesn't have the belt, but the partners, yeah, for the, so.
Yeah. He says that they were already. Like being targeted this morning. So I don't want to. This is just a blue.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Leave that. Oh, wait, no, that's not hers. One photograph that was attached to here.
Yeah.
Printed that.
Oh, it's right here.
Deputy Laura, can you see if everyone is here? Oh, that's fine. I just want to see if the jurors are here.
Where do we go?
About what? Well, be without them.
But those blue.
Yeah.
I need them.
Are you gonna eat this one?
Right.
Maybe.
All right, that's all I need.
And I'm gonna need all those files, Dorman, that I said I was recalling. Oh, Jenna, you're there. Thank you. I can't see. Everybody's here? Okay. All right, as soon as he comes out, then we'll take it up.
Thank you.
Jenna,
She just said, wait, just to go get the files. You
all right, thank you.
want to keep those.
Mhm. Well, I need all of the cases that we didn't hear today, because I need to put it in the system. So whatever is remaining. If you want, I can tell you which ones they are. All right, so Dustin Newkirk. You gave me one of his files. He has two, but I just giving me one is fine. Robert Thompson. And he's on page 2 of the docket. Oh, you know what? Let me do this. I'm gonna highlight it for you. Everyone that's highlighted off to the side, those are the ones that I need. So that's highlighted. So, and that one's highlighted. Okay. Yes. Cindy, are you ready?
Yes.
Court is calling 2019 CR 12495 State versus Tamar McIntyre. If I could have parties announced for the record.
Thanks, Jason Garahan and Megan Galloway for the state, Your Honor.
John Hunter, Jerry Goldstein, Thomas Lane for Mr. McIntyre, Your Honor. He's
And
present.
are you Mr. McIntyre? Are both parties ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, if you could state, if you could have your witness just retake the stand. Thank you. Yes.
All right, for the jury.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, you're still under oath. And if you could just restate your name for the record, please.
Joanna Reyes.
All right, make sure you keep your voice up so that members of the jury can hear. All right, defense, I believe it's still your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, Ms. Reyes, when we left off yesterday, I had asked you if you had previously told the detective that you knew that Mark getting into the car had the intention of having sex with you. Do you recall that question?
No, sir.
Okay, well, let me ask you again. When Mark got into your car, you knew that his intention was to have sex with you, right?
No, sir.
But that's not what you told the detective, correct?
No.
You had an opportunity to review your video yesterday after court
Yes, sir.
in its entirety,
Yes.
okay? I'm gonna call your attention to about 50 minutes and 39 seconds into that. Mr. Lane, if you could get that queued up for us.
Toothbrushes are all over there. Okay, so everybody had a toothbrush?
The ones that was normal was mine,
What do you mean all?
like, because they had vibrating toothbrushes, the ones that like.
So the vibrating ones, are they?
Theirs.
Okay, alright. I know it's gonna be kind of a stretch for you to remember, but you said that the guy had a roll of condoms?
Yes.
What
I,
color?
I.
No, I don't think you're.
I didn't look back.
Did you see the roll?
I didn't see it,
Did you see the lube?
I didn't see none of it, they just said it,
So what did they say?
they just said, were you, like, they just said, or were you trying to rape her and this and that? Or maybe I did see her show me the roll of condoms, but that was it. And I don't know if they're black or gold, I can't remember, but he was just like, were you trying to rape her and this and that was it. And that's the only thing.
Let me ask you, do you think the dude had some condoms in his backpack? Sure.
No, he just thought he was in a book, that's just, that, of course, men, some men. That's of course some men, like, I didn't think that far into it, but that, that was just, I didn't even, like I said, I never looked back, I never looked to the side, nothing. I was scared.
So you told the detective that he thought he was gonna fuck, right?
Because he was interpreting that.
I'm asking you that you interpreted him as having interpreted he was planning on having sex with you, correct?
Because he said that.
And you saw that there were in fact condoms in the man's backpack after this was all over,
I
right?
never saw anything that was in the backpack.
You heard the portion where you said that Tamor showed you the condoms, right?
Yes, but I didn't see anything else that was in the backpack.
And the reason why Mark thought that he was going to have sex with you is because that's what you led him to believe, correct?
Speculation, she
I
can't
know.
testify to what.
There's nothing speculative about what she previously said.
Approach. All right. So defense, ask your question and then state if there's an objection to it, you can make your objection. And I'll give the defense a chance to respond to that objection and I will make a ruling. So ask your question, defense.
Mark thought he was going to have sex with you because you had led him to believe that's what was going to happen that day, right?
No, sir.
Objection. Speculation.
All right. The objection, the witness has already answered. Ask your next question.
Thank you, Judge. Yesterday, to recap, we talked about the fact that Mark had tried to contact you on Instagram some time back before this incident, correct?
Correct,
And he had contacted you, right?
correct,
And that resulted in you blocking him from your Instagram account, right?
correct.
Because his account was largely pornographic in nature, right?
Objection, that's been asked and answered, and speculation.
All right. That'll be the objection to asked and answered will be overruled.
You can answer the question, ma'am.
Correct,
And after you blocked him, you created a different Instagram account, correct?
yes.
In fact, you've created several different Instagram accounts over the years, right?
No, sir.
You've only created one new Instagram account?
I believe so. I'll change the username for my safety, but I only have one other account.
Okay, but so you've changed the username multiple occasions, right?
Yes, sir.
And so you eventually, through a different username, made contact with Mark again, or he made contact with you? Which was it?
I messaged him.
Okay. And you discussed doing a photo shoot, right?
Correct,
And you and he asked you about doing the photo shoot in lingerie and underwear, right?
correct,
And you advised the detective of this fact and the fact that you knew that that was the kind of photography he was into, correct?
correct.
And so when Mark showed up at the car, he was surprised to see that there were all these other people in the car besides you, right?
No, sir.
But that's why he called off the photo shoot, wasn't it?
He said he had to reschedule because he had another person.
But he didn't text you that, did he?
No,
He told you that in person inside your car after you all had driven to pick him up for the photo shoot, right?
correct.
So the only thing that had changed between the time that you talked to him before and the time he got in your car was that there were 3 dudes in the car with you, right?
Can you say that again?
The only
Or
difference
repeat it?
between when you arranged for him to meet you for this shoot and when he got in the car was that there were 3 dudes in the car, right?
He knew there was people there.
Let me ask you a question. Can I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what I marked as Defendant's Exhibit 10. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes,
Who are the people depicted in that photograph?
my ex-boyfriend,
And you?
yes.
Object to relevance, Your Honor.
All right. If I could see,
Foundation.
if I could see the exhibits, the exhibit, please.
Who is Rashard Horace?
I was working.
You were dating Mr. Horace in roughly 2018 until 2021, something like that?
Objection, relevance,
Sustained.
How long were you dating Mr. Horace?
objection, relevance,
Sustained.
Did you spend time with Mr. Horace after the date, after April 23rd, 2017?
objection, relevance,
That will be
Your Honor.
overruled.
I have to be able to ask.
I've
her-
said the objection is overruled.
So you spent time with Mr. Horace after the offense date of April 23rd, 2017, right?
Correct,
And it was a lot of time, correct?
correct,
You actually at one point moved to Houston to be with Mr. Horace, correct?
correct.
And during that time period, you discussed aspects of this case and your involvement. Do you recall that?
No,
Did you tell Mr. Horace that
objection, calls for hearsay, both hearsay and improper impeachment.
it's not improper impeachment? Under 613, I have to confront her with the substance of her prior statement.
Objection is sustained.
Oh, we're gonna take a vote in a second. Hold on. You testified a moment ago that Mark knew that there would be men in the car with you, correct?
correct.
But that is not what you told Mr. Horace, is it?
Objection, hearsay,
That'll be overruled.
That is not what you told Mr. Horace, is it?
I never told him anything besides that I had a case.
You never told Mr. Horace that you intended to get Mark to come for the photo shoot alone with you?
No, sir.
Now, you testified previously that you did not know Mark except as an acquaintance on Instagram, correct?
Correct.
But that's not what you told Mr. Horace, is it?
That is not true.
You've told Mr. Horace that you've known Mark since high school, right?
No, sir. I knew him because of high school. He was older than us.
That's what I'm asking. Because of high school, you knew of him?
Of him, correct.
And you also told Mr. Horace that he had tried to violate you on a prior occasion, correct?
No, I did not.
And you also told Mr. Horace that you didn't tell Mr. Mcintyre or any of the other people in the car about this past interaction with Mark before getting in the car with him that day to pick him up, right?
No, sir.
And you also didn't tell Mr. Mcintyre or anybody else that you secreted a gun underneath your seat in the car when you went to go pick him up that day, right?
That is not true.
You also didn't tell Mr. Horace that when he got in the car, you told everybody in the car about the fact that Mark was a pornographer and that he had done creepy things and that he had tried to do creepy things with you while you were in high school, right?
I never said that.
And you also didn't tell anybody in the car. Well, let me back up. You told Mr. Horace that when Mark told you that the photo shoot was called off, there was a demand to look into Mark's backpack to see if he really was a photographer, right?
No, sir.
And you told Mr. Horace that when you looked into the backpack and there was an examination of this camera, that you found child pornography on it, right?
objection,
No, sir.
objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Approach, please.
Yes, you may approach. All right, defense. The state filed a motion in limine Defense, you were aware of the state's motion in limine. And I informed both parties, either side, if you have a motion in limine, before you enter into any territory that's the subject of the motion in limine, that you approach. And the reason why I do that is because, as both parties know, I do not know what the evidence is in your case. I don't know any facts of the case. I'm hearing this case as the jury is hearing it. And in the state's motion in limine, on page 2, it states, the state requests that the court grant this motion in limine and instruct the defense counsel to approach the bench and present the proposed evidence outside the presence of the jury before voir dire, opening statement, questioning, or in any matter bringing any witness or evidence of any of the following matters. And the number one thing says, any crimes, wrongs, or bad acts of the victim, Mark Anthony Saldivar. So, defense, it appears to the court that you've violated the motion in limine, unless you're going to try to tell the court that possession of child pornography is not a bad act.
Your Honor, what I'm trying to elicit from the witness.
No. The question is whether or not you were aware of the motion in limine, which you were, and whether or not you violated it in regards to violation of condition number 1. What you're trying to do with the witness, and excuse me, I'm going to have the witness step down. And counsel, you'll take your client to the back. You're still under oath and the rule has been invoked. And what I can tell you, unless you have some photos of child pornography that you're saying that the complainant had, then you're just throwing questions out and you're violating the motion in limine. It clearly states that you all are supposed to approach. Now, unless you all think that child pornography is not a bad act, then I don't know why that's a crime. Because if you're saying it's not a bad act, you asked this witness a question and it involved child pornography. Did I hear that incorrectly?
You heard that correctly, Your Honor, and I'd like to also make aware to the court yesterday when we approached about my motion in limine, the court specifically regurgitated condition number 1 to defense in regards to the nude photos.
Your Honor, I understand that the court is of the opinion we violated the motion.
No, not of the opinion. You violated the motion in limine. The motion in limine says that you are to approach before questioning or in any matter bringing any witness or evidence of any of the following matters. Any crimes, wrongs, or bad acts of the victim, Mark Anthony Saldivar. And you're asking this witness about whether or not he had child pornography or something in his camera. The court considers that a bad act.
Your Honor, to be clear, the questioning of the witness is intended to establish whether or not she previously made these statements. They're not being offered under Rule 613 for their truth. They're being offered for what she said to another individual. That
you are still, what you're questioning her about is a bad act that she said that was the bad act of the complainant. And that's a motion in limine. And you all should approach before you do that. You violated the motion. The court is finding that you violated the motion in limine. And the only question now is how is that corrected? Because nobody approached the court to say, I'm going to start asking questions that is related to number 1 to the state's motion in limine.
I understand the court's ruling. I've given my explanation for it. As far as the remedy is concerned, the court will do as it sees fit. I understand.
Oh, no, I am. But you're still, it appears to court, acting as though you haven't violated number 1, and you have. You violated that motion in limine.
Your Honor,
And I can tell you, yes, counsel.
I think we're slightly, we understand the court's ruling. However, I do want the record to reflect, at least, that what we're asking is what the witness's previous statement. We are not accusing anybody of anything, and we're certainly not trying to accuse Mark, and we will be happy to explain to the jury.
It's still a violation of the motion in limine. Hypothetically, if somebody were to ask for it, any defendant, not just your defendant, if somebody were to ask a witness on the stand, hey, by the way, and didn't you tell somebody else that the defendant had possession of child pornography, the defense would be objecting because it's a violation of the motion in limine. It's a violation of the motion in limine in fact and in spirit.
Well, it is intended because this witness gave a number of prior statements. One to a police officer during an interrogation, which was video recorded. Another under oath before another judge in a different courtroom.
But here's the thing, it doesn't,
I'd
it
like-
doesn't matter to the court. What matters to the court is that it's a bad act, and all you all had to do was approach the court. I would have heard it, what you are seeking to get from this witness, and I would have made a ruling on it. But
I'm-
instead, you have people who are violating rules, and I'm finding you violated the motion in limine rule. It's not supposed to be brought up until it's brought up to the court outside the presence of the jury. Now, what you have done is by bringing this up, I don't know if the jury's going to believe he was in possession of child pornography or not. I don't know if he was in possession of child pornography or not, because nothing has been presented to the court. And all you all had to do was approach the court and said, Your Honor, I believe we're going to go into number one of the state's motion in limine. And you know what I would have done? I would have had the jury step out and I would have said, okay, what's the issue here? And you would have told me that and I would have made a ruling.
I believe this came up yesterday.
No,
Yes.
not the possession of child pornography.
Possession of photographs on the camera
Of nudes.
right.
That's it, of nudes. And when we were here at the bench, I even told the state, okay, he has nude photos, allegedly. I said, how is that a bad act? Having a nude photo is not necessarily a bad act.
I see. The
And
first-
both parties said, yes. Mr. Hunter, yes, Judge, you're right, it's not a bad act. And then we go a step further today, and now it's possession of child pornography. And I'm not going to allow you all to ask that question, and I'm going to instruct the jury to disregard.
We understand, Joe.
We understand. And there are some additional matters that she spoke of that have nothing to do with nudity or pornography. And
And what would that be?
Your Honor, I don't believe that any other bad acts or potential bad acts of Mark Anthony Saldivar will be discussed other than those things which were discussed in opening statement related to the.
I'll determine whether it comes in or not. And you know why I'm going to determine whether it comes in or not? Because there was a state's motion in limine that says any crimes, wrongs, or bad acts of the victim, Mark Anthony Saldivar, you'd approach beforehand. And I need to make a ruling on whether or not it's relevant and whether or not it should be admissible. That's me. That's my job.
I understand your.
So what other acts or what other bad acts that you feel, crimes, wrongs, or bad acts of the victim, Mark Anthony Saldivar, that you feel this witness is going to be questioned?
I can tell the court that it's going to be, and I don't know if there will be disputed or not, that he damaged the vehicle. I guess that could be considered a bad act. I want to.
Well, with regards to the damage of the vehicle, allegedly, it said that he put his foot through the glass of the vehicle. That's a part of this whole alleged offense and the offense date. So, counsel, you all know that if there's evidence that's going to come in that he damaged the windshield, that's already in through other people.
Right, and the issue of what she said back to that, to our client, she says that she didn't say anything, that she looked straight ahead, didn't look to the side.
All right,
didn't
so
look behind.
here-
May I just finish?
We're getting off track. We're with the bad acts.
Well, I'm gonna suggest that she has told people, and I believe if she says that's correct, that I never said anything other than that, to Mr. McIntyre, part of the race just of the offense, if she said something other than what she told the police officer, I believe that's a prior inconsistent statement, and we're entitled to ask her about it. And by the way,
I'm
it
not
has nothing
challenging-
to do with
I'm not challenging.
pornography, sex, Anything else?
Counsel, I'm not challenging anyone on inconsistent statements.
Okay.
I'm not challenging anybody on that. The court knows the rules of evidence. What I am saying is there's a motion in limine. And I think it's safe to say for the people who have been practicing even a year that you know you're not supposed to violate motions in limine. And number two, if there's an alleged offense and videos have been shown in exhibits that it's alleged to be, or maybe the jury feels it's already been established that the person who kicked in a window or damaged a window of a vehicle is the complainant because witnesses have said it's the complainant who did that. So you all know questioning the witness about that, that's really not about the motion in limine. The
That's
motion
what
in
we're going to-
limine is about your co-counsel violating it.
My able co-counsel, I can tell you if I can get 5 seconds, I believe he will go into next the matter of what was said that precipitated the fight.
All right,
Fight.
let me
And
just-
I don't think it's about anything, and I think we're entitled to ask the witness.
Let me just tell you.
Yeah.
You violated the motion in limine.
We got,
You will not ask this witness any questions about child pornography on a camera unless you have
we agree.
proof
We're
that
not-
there's child pornography on a camera.
Well, by the way, we do have proof of that,
Mhm.
and it was a legitimate question. However, for the court's ruled on it. That's not what I'm discussing. I'm talking about what we're gonna do next. And while I can't look into his mind, I presume since the court has ruled on it, we can make a bill later, but we're not gonna do anything in front of the
Yeah.
jury. However, I do believe conversation, what she tells the police officer, what she tells the judge, if there's somebody that says you said something else, I believe that's fair game, that's impeachment. And all I don't want to do is, we shouldn't have to have the hearing like this before we ask every question.
No,
And if it doesn't involve child pornography or some extraneous offense, I think we're
no,
entitled.
you all have to have a hearing because it's a part of their motion in limine.
Not,
you
not
can't
if it's
just-
not an offense.
Here's,
Or
yes,
misconduct.
and the last time I checked, possession of child
And we
pornography.
agree.
It's an
And-
offense.
And we're gonna be chastised and the court's gonna do something.
Oh, no, my chastisement is just stating the law. There's a motion in limine in place and the defense has violated. And I am not going to allow you to ask questions about child pornography.
We're not gonna do that based
All right.
on the court's ruling.
Look like
However,
the
we
jury-
should be
Your
able
Your Honor,
to.
just in anticipation, the only other aspects of this questioning that I believe will venture into territory that the state might object to would be questioning about whether or not she had a hand in getting the gun into Mr. McIntyre's hands, if that is in fact what happened. And secondly, whether or not she is the source of the marijuana, which I'm not clear on.
All right, so here's the thing. And let me just tell you, this is what I'm going to say this.
She was asked that.
This is what I'm going to say, and I want you all to listen to me clearly. Both sides have been practicing law for more than 2 seconds. Everyone here knows that if you're asking questions and those questions are related to what's already been brought in evidence, the marijuana, it's already in there. It's already in the evidence. Who had it, what they did with it? Yeah, you can ask questions about that.
And guns.
What?
And guns.
The gun, it's already there. But I don't want any deflections where people are pretending as though they don't know that they violated the motion in limine. So I'm bringing the jury back in and I'm telling them to disregard the last question. I'm telling them to disregard any testimony or questions about child pornography. Does everyone understand?
Yes.
And the defense, you violated the motion in limine. Oh, if you could have your witness take the stand, please.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witness was not in the courtroom while those discussions were had.
Yes.
Thank
Just 1 second, they're gonna bring the witness back in. You can bring the jurors in.
All right, for the jury.
Everyone, please be seated. And could I have counsel approach? All right, ladies and gentlemen, the last question that mentioned the words child pornography, you are to totally disregard that question. Does everyone understand? Is everyone able to do that? You are not to consider it for anything. You are to totally disregard the question, and I don't believe an answer to the question was made, but if an answer to the question was made, you are to totally disregard that answer as well. Does everyone understand? Is everyone able to do that? All right, defense, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Reyes, you said that you didn't see anything other than the condoms that were shown to you, correct? In terms of the contents of his backpack?
Correct.
But you told the detective that there was a roll of condoms, lube, and a new outfit in the backpack, correct?
That's what Tamar said.
Okay, and you believed that, right?
No, I didn't believe anything.
You didn't tell the detective you didn't believe anything.
He asked me what was in the bag and I said what was said to me.
So when you explained it, you were explaining it in terms of what someone else told you, not in terms of what you believed to be in the bag?
Correct.
I'm gonna call your attention to this segment of your statement.
And he was like, give me all your shit, this and that, and then, so the guy doesn't wanna give him his stuff. And I was just like, what are you doing? And then he was just like, just shut up, and he was like, give me your stuff, and then they started pulling this backpack away from him, and then that's when they opened it and saw all that stuff.
So what was in the bag? You said-
There was a roll of condoms, a lube, a bottle of lube, and a brand new outfit.
And Judge, sorry, just for purposes of the record, what portion was that? I don't know what,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, the VLC player numbers.
I believe that's at 1641.
1641. Thank you.
So when Mark gets in the car, he says in your words, he wanted to reschedule the photo shoot, right?
Correct.
But you proceeded to drive away from his house anyway with him
He
in the
asked
car.
me for a ride to North Star.
Okay, so you were driving him to North Star Mall, which was where you were going anyway, right?
Correct.
And that obviously caused confusion in the car, correct?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
When he told everyone in the car that he was going to have to reschedule the photo shoot, there was a question in the car as to whether or not he was even a photographer, right?
No,
Objection,
sir.
hearsay.
That would be overruled.
And that was when the demand was made to see the inside of the backpack, correct?
No, sir.
And it's then that the men found condoms and lube in the backpack, right?
I never saw it.
And again, Mr. McIntyre was your boyfriend at the time, right?
He said I was his girlfriend.
Okay. You weren't dating Mr. McIntyre at all? That you don't recall your testimony from yesterday?
Yes, I recall it, but he would call me his girlfriend.
Okay. You were dating him, right?
So he says.
Okay, you dispute that now?
I always said I was never wanting to date him.
Okay, you recall your testimony yesterday,
Yes,
and you recall saying that you were his girlfriend yesterday.
yes,
Okay. So when they find the lube and the condoms in the backpack, that's when a physical altercation breaks out, right?
I never saw it, but yes.
And that's when you handed Taymor a gun, right?
No,
That's what you told Mr. Horace, correct?
no,
And eventually, as the struggle continued, that was when eventually Mark was ejected from the car. He was thrown out of the car, right?
I asked them to let him go after they were beating him.
And when we talk about they, Jalen Bell and Jeremiah Rodriguez were in the backseat of the car with Mark, right?
Correct.
They were the ones who had the easiest access to hit Mark, right?
So did Taymor.
Okay, so you described that Mark would have been sitting directly behind Taymor, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And so when Mark gets out of the car, he jumps on the hood of the car, right?
not immediately.
Right, he tries the doors to get back in first, correct?
Correct,
And then when that doesn't work, he jumps on the hood of the car.
correct.
And while he's on the hood of the car, he begins to stomp the windshield, right?
Once we were in the Chick-fil-A parking lot, when Taymor told me to drive the car back and forth.
Objection non-responsive.
Overrule. You can
Finish the
answer.
question. Answer me.
That's when he smashed the windshield.
Okay. And he was kicking the windshield, right?
He kicked it once.
And you said he was kicking the windshield at you, correct?
He kicked it once.
I'm asking you, have you said previously that he kicked it at you?
I don't know who he was kicking it at.
Okay. Ma'am, I'm going to call your attention to roughly minute 7:05 of the interview.
But what happened was, the guy that I had, well, Tamar, Tamar, he messaged me through Instagram because he wanted us to get a photo shoot. So that's what we're messaging about. Then Tamar would take my phone and he was talking to him, like, Tamar had my phone the whole entire time. I barely got to talk to my mom, anybody, anyway, so one day he was just like, okay, we're gonna go pick him up so we can have our photo shoot. I said, okay, so we went and picked him up. He asked me if I could just give him a ride to North Star, and I was like, okay, that's fine. And so we were going, and out of nowhere, we were at a stoplight, and Tamar takes out a gun and tells me to go everything. I didn't know this was gonna happen. I swear on everything, I didn't know this was gonna happen. And they all just started fighting. And I'm at the light and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I was like, please just let him out, just let him out. And they were pushing him out. And I think Shane must have grabbed his backpack and opened it and took out everything inside of it. And what we found was a roll of condoms, a bottle of lube, and a whole brand new outfit. So he was like, just get him out of the car, get him out of the car. So they were pushing him out of the car and he was like, no, I'm not going anywhere. And he was trying to get back in the car and they were trying to push him back out. And the light was still red the whole entire time. And I was just there like, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. And Tina was just like, shut up, shut up, shut up. And I was just like, okay. And I was just at the wheel. And then we were pushing up again, the lights finally turned green. I was like, okay, this is my chance to get away from this dude. So, and then he jumps on my hood. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? And I still didn't know what to do. Timur was like, keep driving. And he pointed the gun at me, he was like, keep driving. And I was like, no, I was like, and I was gonna be on the highway, so I'm getting away. And he was like, no, he was like, pull over somewhere. So I pulled over and they had me to running. And, the guy was just kept stopping on my hood and everything. I was trying to back up so he could get off my car. And, I didn't know what to do. Like, I really was just going back and forth because I didn't know what to do. And, then, guy said something and he kicked it through, he tried kicking me through the windshield, and then when Tamar did that,
What did you do?
he shot him.
So you told the detective that he was kicking at you through the windshield, right? You also told the detective that you said we found condoms and lube in the backpack, right?
I said that, but I never saw it myself, and I made that clear afterwards.
And in the course of that, roughly slightly after 8 minutes and 25 seconds into it, you say the phrase, and he pointed the gun at you. And I just want to get a sense of this. During the exchange, when Mark is on the hood of the car stomping, you told everybody in the car that you thought he had a gun, right?
No,
That's what you told Mr. Horace, though, right?
no, I didn't.
And that you were yelling, he's got a gun.
No, I did not.
That's when Tamor shot him, right?
No,
You originally indicated that you didn't know whether anyone had a gun in the car when you got in the car that day, right? You remember telling the detective that?
I said that Tamar and Jalen always carried them.
Okay, so you don't remember telling the detective that you didn't know anyone had a gun when you got in?
No.
But then later in the interview, you're asked about what gun Jalen Bell was carrying, and you specifically told the detective he was carrying a 9mm, right?
Yes, that's what he always carried.
After the shooting, as you're driving away, Jalen Bell had the backpack, right?
I don't know who had the backpack.
And you know that it was Jalen Bell who threw Mark's cell phone out of the car, correct?
So he said,
Okay, you didn't believe that?
I never saw it.
Did you tell the detective that Jalen threw the phone out of the window?
Correct.
And you know that it was Jalen who went through the wallet. I believe you testified to that fact yesterday, correct?
Correct.
Now, I want to get something clear. You testified that Mark got into the car with a backpack and a camera. You recall saying that?
Correct.
Was the camera in the backpack or was it separate from the backpack?
I never saw.
You never saw a camera,
I knew he had a camera.
but,
He's a photographer.
but you say you didn't see it.
I didn't see if it was outside the bag or in the bag.
Okay. What's in Ector County? Odessa?
Yes.
What's there?
Objection relevant.
What's the relevancy?
He was apprehended in Ector County.
All right, objection sustained.
Where did you go? Where were you when you were arrested for this?
Odessa.
Okay, why did you go to Odessa?
Objection relevant.
Overruled.
Kayla's friends took me over there.
Okay. Which friends?
Deja and Keon,
Okay. They gave you a ride?
yes,
Did you have any family there?
no,
You have any connections there?
no,
Okay. After this incident, and after Tamor and Jalen left Jeremiah's house, you never saw Tamor again, right?
no, only the FaceTime.
Okay. But you often told others that you were unable to get a hold of Tamor on FaceTime, right?
Not true,
Okay. You weren't upset that Tamor wasn't responding to you or answering your phone calls?
not at all.
You remember that you were at one point concerned that you might be pregnant and you were trying to reach him and you couldn't get a hold of him?
No, they're manipulating me to think that I was.
Okay. You're referring to who when you say they?
Kayla and his dad.
Okay. You don't remember the night that Desiree found out she was pregnant?
Objection relevant.
It goes
Sustained.
directly to what she's testifying to.
Sustained.
Do you not remember telling Desiree and Kayla that you thought you were pregnant?
No,
You don't remember Kayla and Desiree encouraging you to take a pregnancy test so you know one way or the other?
Kayla made me take a pregnancy test, yes.
Okay, and you weren't pregnant, right?
No,
When you left yourself, when you left San Antonio yourself, you went by way of the Greyhound bus, right?
correct,
And your father took you?
correct,
And you didn't tell your father that you didn't want to go to Dallas, right?
no,
And when you went up to Dallas, you stayed with Kayla and Desiree, right?
correct.
And you called Kayla and Desiree and asked if you could stay there, correct?
I only stayed at Desiree's one night,
Okay, you stayed at Desiree's parents' house, right?
correct.
They had a barbecue, right?
No, they didn't.
They didn't offer you barbecue from a previous occasion?
No, I didn't eat.
While you were in Dallas, you were working as a stripper there too, right?
They made me, yes,
And in order to dance in the Dallas strip club scene, you have to register your fingerprints and show your driver's license to an authority figure, to the county, right?
no, sir,
Okay, you never went to the county to get your fingerprints taken?
yes, but I didn't have to do that at the strip club.
Right, but you did it for your work at the strip club, right?
No, sir,
Okay, why did you go get your fingerprints taken in Dallas County?
because they didn't ask for that,
I thought you just said that you did get your fingerprints taken.
for my ID,
Okay, well, you gave them your ID, right?
correct,
And they photocopied it?
correct,
Okay. And that was in order to get an ID for the strip clubs, right?
correct,
To verify that you were old enough to dance, right?
correct,
Okay. That would have been obviously before you say that your bag and all of your identifiers were stolen, correct?
correct.
When you were interviewed by the detective, you indicated to the detective that there might have been some problem in your family with you dating an African-American man. Do you remember that?
Objection relevant, Your Honor.
Sustained.
It goes to bias, yeah.
Sustained.
Please note my exception.
Motion to disregard, Your Honor, or instruct the jury to disregard.
All right, you didn't disregard the last words from counsel. Does everyone understand? Thank you.
You asked the detective if he could put money on your books so you could call your mother. Do you remember that?
He asked me if there was anything he wanted me to tell my mother, or he wanted him to tell my mother. And he asked me, should she put money on your books? I said, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so he was gonna facilitate her putting money. That's what that was about?
Yeah, he said it.
Do you remember the day that you pled guilty to tampering with evidence in front of Judge Contreras?
Correct.
And you were asked questions by the prosecution related to this offense because they knew that it would probably be some time before you would have to testify in the case, right?
Correct.
And they wanted to, I believe, get a baseline of what your testimony would be at trial. You remember that?
So,
And you were asked about the intent to rob, whether or not there was an intent to rob associated with this case. Do you remember that?
correct.
And you told the judge and the prosecutor, I guess so.
After seeing it, yes,
Okay, but did in your response to the question about whether there was an intent to rob, you said, I guess so, right?
because it happened. I said, I guess so.
I'm just asking you, is that what you said in response to the question about whether there was an intent to rob? I guess so.
Correct, that was what I said.
And you don't remember how many gunshots were fired, right? So at that hearing where you were testifying in front of Judge Contreras, you indicated that you barely knew Jeremiah, right?
When he was in school.
But you did attend school with him, right?
Correct.
So you had known him for a long time,
I knew of him,
okay? But you had interacted with him before.
not like that.
Okay, I mean, when you say not like that, what you're saying is you hadn't previously been driving around town with guns and drugs in a car, right?
No,
But you've seen him in school, you've talked to him on multiple occasions, he's been to parties that you've attended as well.
I only saw him and hung out with him the time that we were at the gathering and after that,
Well, you knew that Jeremiah sold marijuana, right?
yes,
You knew that Jeremiah carried a weapon, right?
yes,
You knew that Jeremiah was a photographer himself and had his own camera, right?
yes.
You stayed at his house, I believe you said for a couple of weeks, right?
It felt like a couple of weeks.
Well, how long was it in actual fact?
I couldn't know the time frame because we were always moving places.
Okay, so you just can't commit to how long you were there.
No, but it felt like a long time.
But then it was more than one night for sure.
Yes,
Okay, when you say a couple of weeks, is that an estimate?
yes.
Pass the witness.
State.
If I could have a moment to get the screen set. Ms. Reyes, I want to show you what has been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit number 126. This item that I'm pointing at, do you recognize what it is and who it belonged to?
Slides,
And who did those slides belong to?
table,
Okay. Now I want to talk to you about your interview with Detective Juarez back on September 5th of 2017. During that interview, did you inform Detective Juarez that you had told Mark Saldivar that you would be with at least 2 friends?
yes,
Okay, and just going back to when you told Mark Saldivar that you would be with 2 friends, why did you say that?
because I wanted to make him aware of what I was going to do.
Okay, and when you showed up, you were with 3 friends. How did that third person get into the picture?
Then I decided to want to go.
Okay. Can you please describe to the jury the relationship between the defendant and Jalen Bell? Were they friends with each other?
Best friends,
Okay. Did you observe them staying together?
yes,
And would you observe them together frequently?
all the time.
And, okay. Now during your interview with Detective Juarez, did you inform Detective Juarez that the defendant was specifically looking for a photographer for a photo shoot?
Correct.
And during your interview with Detective Juarez, did you inform Detective Juarez that prior to what happened at the stoplight on McCullough, you had no knowledge of the defendant's intentions to rob Mark Saldivar?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In your statement to Detective Juarez, did you tell Detective Juarez that the defendant only told you that it was going to be a photo shoot?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In your statement to Detective Juarez, did you tell Detective Juarez that the defendant told Mark, "Give me all your shit"?
Yes, ma'am.
In that interview, did you tell Detective Juarez that Mark didn't want to give up his belongings?
Yes,
In that interview, did you tell Detective Juarez that they took Mark's backpack away from him?
yes,
And when you say they, who do you mean?
same one.
Does that include anybody else?
Same one.
Okay. In your interview with Detective Juarez, you stated that they opened Mark Saldivar's backpack. Is that correct?
Correct.
When you say they, who are you referring to?
Same one.
Does that include anyone else?
Same one.
And in your interview with Detective Juarez, did you tell Detective Juarez that they beat Mark Saldivar?
Yes.
And when you say they, who do you mean?
Cleveland, Jeremiah, same one.
Okay. In your interview with Detective Juarez, did you tell Detective Juarez that they threw Mark Saldivar out of the motor vehicle?
Yes.
And when you say they, who are you referring to there?
Same one.
Okay. Now, in your interview with Detective Juarez asked you if Mark Saldivar was in possession of any weapons. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you tell him when you had the interview with him?
No, he didn't look like a boy that don't have one.
Okay. And in your interview with Detective Juarez, you further stated that you didn't believe that the defendant was acting in self-defense. Isn't that correct?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for ultimate opinion on a legal.
He's opened the door, Your Honor.
All right, that will be sustained as to entering the province of the jury.
And I'd ask the jury to disregard the question and the answer.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you're to disregard that last question and the answer.
Motion for mistrial.
Denied.
Now, regarding, I want to go back to the album cover and your role in the album cover, okay? When we're talking about you being in lingerie, whose idea was that?
Seymour's.
And in your interview with Detective Juarez, isn't it true you told Detective Juarez that the defendant, Tamor Mcintyre, is the one that made you agree to wear lingerie?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you spoke to Detective Juarez, isn't it true that you told him that the defendant was the only person that you saw with a gun on that day?
Yes.
And isn't it true that in that interview with Detective Juarez, you also informed him that the defendant was wearing a white shirt during the offense?
Yes.
And during that interview, you further stated to Detective Juarez that you observed the defendant shoot the guy on the hood of your motor
Objection
vehicle.
to leading, Your Honor.
Sustained.
In your interview with Detective Juarez, what did you tell him about who shot the person that was on the hood of your motor vehicle?
I said, Tamar did it.
During your interview with Detective Juarez, what did you tell him about Jeremiah Rodriguez and what he would sell?
And he sold marijuana.
And you further informed Detective Juarez that you knew that Jeremiah usually carried firearms, correct?
Yes.
Okay. During your interview with Detective Juarez, you also informed him that you, the defendant, and Jalen Bell were staying at Jeremiah Rodriguez's home for at least 1 week prior to the offense,
Objection
correct?
to leading, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Instruct the jury to disregard the question.
Ladies and gentlemen, disregard the question.
Motion for mistrial.
Denied.
When you spoke with Detective Juarez during your interview, who did you tell him, what did you tell Detective Juarez about where you were staying with the defendant, Tamar Mcintyre, and Jalen Bell?
Jeremiah's.
Okay. And when you were answering Mr. Hunter's questions, you kind of further expounded that you couldn't pinpoint an exact time frame. Is that correct?
Mhm.
But you're sure that you were there for some time, right? Okay. Now, in your interview with Detective Juarez, when you were asked who had the backpack when you were at the Mexican restaurant, do you recall who you told him had the backpack?
Yes.
Who is that?
Jalen.
And when Detective Juarez asked you about the camera that Mark Saldivar had, do you recall telling Detective Juarez what color that camera was?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
What color was the camera?
White.
And is that what you told Detective Juarez in your interview?
Yes.
All right. Now, Mr. Hunter asked you a question about whether you saw the camera when Mark got into the vehicle. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Do you recall the exact moment that you saw the camera?
No.
Okay. After the offense, when you all were at the Mexican restaurant, how'd you see the
Objection
camera?
asked and answered and leading, Your Honor.
Overruled.
You can answer the question.
Yes.
When, so you saw the camera at the Mexican restaurant?
No.
Okay. Did you see the camera when y'all were at Jeremiah's house?
Objection asked and answered, Your Honor.
Overruled.
You can answer.
Yes.
Okay. And when you were at Jeremiah's house, who had the camera at Jeremiah's house?
All the boys.
When you say all the boys, who is that?
Jalen, Jeremiah, Tamar.
Okay. Now, back to the Mexican restaurant. What did you observe Jalen Bell doing with Mark's wallet at the Mexican restaurant?
He was tossing all his stuff out.
And isn't that what you told Detective Juarez when you had your interview with him? All right. In your interview with Detective Juarez, you informed Detective Juarez that you, the defendant, and Jalen Bell got a ride from Starbucks to go meet back at Jeremiah Rodriguez's home.
Objection leading, asked and answered.
The objection to leading will be sustained.
Okay. What did you tell Detective Juarez about where you went with the defendant and Jalen Bell after leaving the Mexican restaurant?
And so then
Objection hearsay.
Overruled.
I told him that we went to the Starbucks next door. And Tamar was on my phone, and then a woman came and picked us up.
Now, I want to turn to you about, or talk to you about the defense counsel's line of questioning regarding whether you thought the victim, Mark Anthony Saldivar, had intentions of having sex with you. We saw the video published to the jury, but is this something that was suggested to you by the defendant?
No.
Okay. After the defendant and Jalen Bell went through the bag, what did they say to Mark regarding the items that they saw in the bag?
Tamar said, what do you think that you were going to do? What do you think you were going to do?
Okay. And on the statement that was played for the jury, you said, once you were told the contents of the bag, you were shocked and didn't know what to think. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
All right, but in talking to Detective Juarez, you were kind of guessing as to what Mark's intentions were. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Okay. And you were kind of just stereotyping him in a stereotypical male way. Is that
I'm gonna
correct?
object, Your Honor. This is leading, asked and answered, and it's functionally testifying from the prosecution.
With regards to leading, the objection will be sustained.
Motion to instruct the jury disregard the statement of the prosecutor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you're to disregard the last question from the state.
Motion for mistrial.
Denied.
When you met with Detective Juarez and gave your interview, isn't it true that back on that day in September of 2017, you told him back then that the defendant was threatening to kill you? Okay. And the detective in your interview told you that he was listing you as a suspect in the capital murder, correct?
Objection hearsay.
That will be sustained.
Did the detective tell you anything about what could possibly happen to you if you spoke with him?
Yes.
Okay, and did that include being charged in the offense?
Yes.
And you still decided to talk with him, correct?
Yes.
And when you spoke with Detective Juarez, did you have any plea agreement in place?
No.
Did Detective Juarez promise you anything in exchange for your interview?
No.
At any point, well, you know what? Now I want to turn to the day that you entered your plea agreement. Do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and you gave testimony on that day, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and so on the day that you gave testimony, isn't it true that you testified that you had met Tamor McIntyre at the gathering at Isaac Ibarra's house?
Correct.
Okay. And in that testimony, didn't you further state that you had been with Tamor McIntyre from the beginning of April?
Yes.
Okay. In the testimony that you provided on that day, isn't it true that you stated you and Mark followed each other on Instagram and Tamor wanted a photographer for his album cover?
Yes, ma'am.
In the testimony that you provided, isn't it true that you stated that Tamor told you what kind of plans he had for the album cover, and that included Tamor McIntyre wanting you in lingerie and wearing a mask with weed and guns? In the testimony that you provided, isn't it true that you stated that you, the defendant and Jalen Bell, were staying at Jeremiah's house?
Yes, ma'am.
And you stated the people that were staying at Jeremiah's house was Tamor, Jalen, Desiree, Jeremiah, and Jeremiah's family.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay, and the testimony that you provided, you stated that you were the driver of that black Kia Forte, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And in the testimony that you provided on that day, you further stated that when you picked up Mark Saldivar, he had a camera and a backpack, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to object to asked and answered and cumulative. I also don't think it's a proper impeachment. They can't offer a prior consistent statement if we didn't attack that statement for fabrication.
Judge,
Objection is overruled.
thank you. Now, in the testimony that you provided on the day that you entered your plea agreement, isn't it true that you testified that Tamor McIntyre was sitting in the front passenger seat of your motor vehicle?
Yes.
And on that day, you further stated Jeremiah was sitting behind you, correct?
Correct.
And you also stated on that day that Jalen Bell was in the middle seat, correct?
Yes.
And that the victim, Mark Saldivar, was sitting directly behind Tamor McIntyre, correct?
Yes.
All right. On the day that you entered your plea agreement, you further testified that when you all were at the stoplight, Tamor bought out the gun and pointed it at Mark, correct?
Correct.
You further stated on that day that when Mark didn't want to give up his bag, immediately Tamor started hitting him with the gun.
Correct.
On the day that you entered your plea agreement and provided testimony, isn't it true that you testified that Tamor used and pulled out the gun and stated to Mark, "Give me your backpack"?
Correct.
in the testimony that you provided on the day that you entered your plea agreement, isn't it true that you stated that you were telling Jalen, Tamor, and Jeremiah to just let Mark go?
Yes,
In your previous testimony, you testified that Jalen pushed Mark out of the car, correct?
correct,
All right. In your previous testimony, you testified that once Mark was pushed out of the car, he jumped on the hood of your car, is that correct?
correct,
And in your previous testimony, you testified that you pulled over into the Chick-fil-A.
yes, ma'am,
In your previous testimony on the date that you entered your plea, you testified that Mark was on the hood of the car because his stuff was still inside the vehicle, correct?
yes, ma'am,
And in your previous testimony, you did testify that Mark Saldivar kicked in the windshield, and that's when Tamor got out of the car and shot him, correct?
correct,
When asked on that day how Tamor shot Mark Saldivar, you testified that the defendant, Tamor Mcintyre, opened the door and leaned halfway out and halfway in and shot Mark Saldivar, correct?
I'm gonna object to asked and answered. If we're gonna go through everything in the transcript, we could just offer.
You can make your legal objection. The court will hear the legal objections and make a ruling. So what is your objection?
If I could have a running objection, since we're going through.
What is your
everyone,
objection?
That all of this is cumulative and asked and answered the previous, and much of it is not proper rehabilitation on impeachment by prior consistent statement.
All right,
And
your objection.
if I may respond briefly, Your Honor.
Yes,
They have attacked this witness's credibility. They have alleged that she is testifying under an improper influence or motive. And so under Rule 801E1B, I am allowed to explore this line of questioning with her.
objection is overruled.
And since they further stated that they have no objection to the transcript coming in at this time, the state would offer State's Exhibits 132, which is the transcript, and 133, which is her recorded video statement.
Any objection?
132, no objection. It's prior sworn testimony. Objections to 133, because the proper method of doing that is to.
Well, no, my question is, do you have any objection? And if you do, what's the legal objection?
That the entirety of the statement is not admissible. It contains a great deal of hearsay from another declarant not present to testify.
All right, and which exhibit is that, please? The one that the defense is objecting to?
That would be 133, Your Honor.
All right. Defense states that there's hearsay in 133. Any response?
If you'd like the detective's questions for DACT, I can do that over a break and offer.
All right. With regards to State's Exhibit number 133, defense's objection will be sustained. And what is the other exhibit number, please?
132, Your Honor.
And defense, you have no objection to 132?
Objection.
All right. State's Exhibit number 132 is admitted without objection.
Ms. Reyes, at any point between the offense date until today, have you ever named anyone other than Tamor Mcintyre as the shooter and murderer of Mark Saldivar?
no,
Pass the witness.
Defense?
Briefly, Your Honor.
Yes.
Did you ever tell anybody that he has a gun right before Tamor shot him?
Objection, that's been asked and answered.
Overruled.
Oh, she was overruled, sorry. Have you ever told anybody have you ever told anybody that you were yelling, he has a gun right
No.
before Tamor shot him?
no,
You said that Tamor wanted this photo shoot for his album cover, right?
correct,
But you told Desiree in Dallas that it was for the promotion of your career as a stripper, right?
no,
And just to be clear, you've testified throughout this process that Jalen had the backpack and was going through it, and Jalen had the wallet, right?
correct. Tamar had the backpack as well.
And you told the detective that Jalen threw the phone at him.
That's what he said.
Okay, but that's not how you told it to the detective, right?
I said, that's what Jalen said.
Okay, that's. Call your attention to minute 3619.
Sorry, what was that?
3619.
3619.
Oh, sorry, Thomas, can you? I'm sorry. Did you say that that's what Jalen told you is that it was thrown out of the car?
Yes.
Okay. Um, you told the detective that you had no plan to rob Mr. Saldivar that day when you got in the car to go pick him up, right?
Correct.
And your judgment of what Tamor and the other men in the car did is then based on their actions, not their words, right? To you.
Correct.
Nobody ever said, hey, Joanna, we're going to go rob this guy today, right?
No,
Okay. That wasn't something that you expected to happen when you got there, right?
no,
These men reacted to Mark when he got in the car and this thing escalated and then it happened, right?
it happened at the stoplight.
At the stoplight.
Yes.
Okay. So when you told the detective you believed that this was a robbery, you're basing it off what you saw these men do at that stoplight.
Correct.
And so the very beginning of our questioning yesterday, you and I were talking about the fact that Mark had contacted you previously on Instagram. You blocked him, and then you made contact with him again, right? And that you were discussing this photo shoot with Mark, right?
Correct.
And in that conversation, you weren't telling Mark that it was about the album cover, was it?
I don't remember texting him much. Tamar would text him as well.
Okay, but you definitely had conversations with him, right?
Yes.
And all of the conversations were on your phone, right?
Yes.
So let me ask you this. Did you give the police your phone?
No, because Caleb broke it.
Okay. So you didn't have a phone to provide the police?
No,
Okay. Did you have the broken phone to provide the police?
no,
Okay. Did you give the police your account information to log into Instagram?
yes,
Okay. Did you give the police account information to log into Snapchat?
yes,
Okay. So you don't know what happened to those things.
no,
Were you given any Instagram messages or Snapchat messages to review in preparation of your testimony?
no.
Ask the witness.
No further questions.
Is this witness excused or subject to recall?
Used by the state, Your Honor.
Subject to recall.
All right, the rule has been invoked. You're not allowed to discuss your testimony with anyone during the pendency of this trial. Make sure that you're available in case someone, either the state or the defense wishes to recall you. All right, you may step down.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief recess for you all. And I'm going to have you all to come back at 3:25. Remember my previous instructions, you're not allowed to investigate anything about this case. You're not allowed to start deliberating amongst yourself. Everything that you need to know about this case is to come from the courtroom. Does everyone understand? All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors.
light building and my clients would actually, they would step out of the elevator and grab them and pull them before they could get to my floor.
Well, Jerry, Neil and I have known each other for a long time. He tells this story, and I don't think there were any witnesses to the story he tells about our first exam.
I still have bad dreams because of it. So.
And by the way, if he considers them bad dreams, they must be really.
Jerry, he will tell you that I didn't have books in law school.
She was still.
By the way, he had them, he just never read them.
All right.
I love you, Neil.
Are both parties ready to proceed?
Yes, Judge.
Sorry, Your Honor.
All right, so State, if you could go ahead and have your next witness
Yes, Judge.
on the stand, please.
Oh, I put it over here to charge it. Sorry.
Oh, no.
And does everyone else have their court reporter microphones?
I do, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. Yes, we do.
Okay, all
Are
right.
you able to hear me? Testing.
Sorry.
All right, let's bring the jurors in.
All right, for the jury?
Oh, okay.
All right, everyone, please be seated. State, call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the state calls Officer Jose Bonal.
All right, could you raise your right hand? Is solemnly, I'm sorry, just 1 second. Could I have parties approach just briefly?
One, can you tell us where you're currently employed
Yes, sir. I'm currently employed for the city of Dallas as a police officer,
and how long have you held that position?
approximately 18 and a half years.
And do you have to go through certain training to become an officer for the Dallas Police Department?
Yes, sir. I had to go through a 8-month police academy. After that, I had to do a 6-month field training officer type of training. And then I subsequently made it out to the patrol center.
Right. And so are you a certified police officer in the state of Texas?
Yes, sir. I am.
I'm gonna go ahead and ask you, were you a police officer in the Dallas PD on May 7th, 2017?
Yes, sir.
And were you dispatched to a scene at approximately 4:55 a.m. in the morning?
Yes, sir. I was.
Where were you dispatched to?
I was dispatched to an apartment complex in the on West Davis Street in the city of Dallas.
And do you know, well, can you tell the jury why you were dispatched there?
So we were dispatched regarding what I interpreted as a welfare check. The taxi cab company called and said that they've been trying to reach their cab driver after he had been pressing the panic button several times and they could not reach him over the radio.
And did you have anybody with you on this night?
I did, sir. I had a fellow officer with me.
And what officer was that?
It's Officer McComas.
And were y'all, I guess, riding together or were y'all riding separately?
We were riding together. Yes, sir.
And did y'all make this scene?
We made it out to the scene, yes.
And when you made it to the scene, what did you do?
So we did observed a white van, taxi type of style van parked within the apartment complex. And so we made contact with the driver, check on the status.
And we made contact with the driver. What did you do after that?
So it's like, hey buddy, are you okay? And basically the driver responded saying, yeah, this guy owes me $55 and his buddy hasn't came back to pay me.
And you sort of motioned with your hand, like a thumb motioning towards your back. Was that what the driver was motioning towards you?
Yes, sir, indeed. We didn't even know that the taxi cab had an occupant, a rear occupant. So he kind of hinted.
And did you ever make contact with this occupant?
We did.
And how did you make contact with this occupant?
So the sliding door on the driver's side, on my side, opened up. I believe the taxi cab driver pressed the button, but it automatically opened up. That's when I saw the subject sitting second row seat.
The second row seat in the van. And what did you notice about this occupant of this van?
So this occupant appeared to be impaired. I'm not sure if he was half asleep or impaired. He was clearly impaired because you could tell he wasn't completely in a sense.
And did you make actual contact with this individual?
Yes, sir, we did.
And did you speak with this individual?
We did.
And did you ask him about if he had the money to pay the taxi cab?
We did, yes, sir.
And did he notify you of whether he had the money or not?
He had no form of payment.
And at that point, did you try to identify the individual?
I did, just to ensure we knew who we were speaking with.
And did he give you a name?
He did.
And subsequently, did you ever find out if that was his true and correct name?
So I ran back to the car computer and I ran that information and didn't check out.
And please explain to the jury, what do you mean by not check out?
So the name he provided, we run into the system, and I've received a no records found, which is usually reserved for someone with no ID or someone providing fictitious information.
And then did you make contact with the individual again?
So at that point, yes.
And what did you do at that point?
So at that point, I was looking at depth of service as a possible arrestable. So I wanted to make sure the scene was safe. So I told him to step out of the taxi cab to ensure that he was patted down for officer safety.
And will you explain to the jury how you pat somebody down for officer safety?
Do you need me to stand, sir, or just talk?
You can just explain it if you can.
Yes, yes. So we have to make sure we know where the hands are, just so, because the hands will kill you. So when I told him to step out, I told him to face the van, and I grabbed both of his hands behind him. So I grabbed on his thumbs, because that way you can control the subject better that way. And as I did that, I went to perform my pat down, which is of the outer clothing. And when I went across his waistband, that's when I felt a bulge and a metal object.
And through your training experience, did you believe that what that object was?
Yes, sir.
What did you believe it was?
A handgun.
And at that point, what did you do?
So at that point, I quickly pushed him on his back and pressed him against the van. I said, "You better not move." And I looked at my cover officer and I said, "Cuff him quick," because I was concerned he was going to try to reach for the weapon.
And were y'all able to handcuff this individual?
Yes, sir.
And did you retrieve what you believe to be a handgun in his waistband?
Yes, sir. It was a handgun.
And at that point, was he detained at that point?
Yes, sir. He was.
And this handgun that you retrieved, do you know what type of handgun it was?
The black 9mm Smith & Wesson.
And do you know the serial number of that particular weapon?
I don't recall. It's been 8 years. So.
Okay, and that's what I was about to ask you. You have a pretty good memory if you memorized it, but let me mark.
Okay.
I'm going to show you what's marked State Exhibit number 34. Can you just flip through that and tell me if you can identify it?
Yes. Okay, yes, sir, I found the serial number.
Okay, and so the state exhibit number 134, it's not entered evidence, but the fact is that a police report that you and Officer McComas made?
Yes, sir, this will be my report.
Your report,
Yes,
okay.
sir.
And so, I think the previous question was, do you have the serial number of that particular, handgun?
I do.
And what would that serial number be?
So it's gonna be L like Lincoln, E like Edward, J like John. And then it's 9244.
9244? Okay. And at that time, was that weapon seized and then placed in property?
It was, yes, sir.
Mark State Exhibit number 135. I want to ask you if you can cut that envelope open, please.
Anyway,
Anywhere, yes.
In defense, if you need to move about the courtroom, you can move about the courtroom.
Thank you, Your Honor.
If you can open it up and please retrieve what's inside of it.
yes,
You can open that up. You can open that bag. Please view what the contents of that bag was and tell me if that is the handgun that you seized that night and if you have a serial number on
yes, sir, I do.
it. And is that serial number LEJ 9244?
It is,
Thank
it
you.
is.
And in this bag also is contents of looks like a magazine. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
And is that the magazine, or if you're aware, that goes to this handgun?
It appears to be the magazine, yes, sir.
Appears to be the hand, okay, thank you. Judge, at this time, the state would be offering state exhibit number 135 and the evidence presented to the defense for the objection.
No objections.
All right, State's Exhibit 135 is admitted.
And it's, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I don't know if I said it, but and its contents.
No objections to the contents of it.
All right, State's Exhibit 135 and contents are admitted.
This is the handgun that you took off the individual that night, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, at any time, were you able to truly identify the individual that you had detained?
Yes, sir.
And what was his true name?
Jalen Bell.
Jalen Bell. Now, that individual, can you tell the jury, well, what was this individual's height?
Well, he's a pretty tall guy. I'm only 5'6", so I remember he stood over me pretty good. For my report here. So back then, when we had detained the gentleman, he was 6'4" and approximately 240 pounds.
And I see you looking down. Are you referencing your police report to decipher that?
Yes, sir.
And again, I understand it's 7.5 years later, so I understand that.
Yeah.
Subsequently, did you arrest this individual named Jalen Bell?
Yes, sir, I did.
And this was on May 7th, 2017.
Yes, sir.
And what did you arrest him for?
So we arrested him for the gun. He had a little bit of marijuana on his person. We arrested him for a warrant and also for providing fictitious information as a fugitive from justice.
Thank you, officer. We'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Defense?
This encounter occurred on May 7th, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you said at 4 o'clock in the morning or so?
It's just before 5, sir.
Okay, gotcha. And you said that you placed the gun in evidence?
It was my partner, sir.
Okay. Are you familiar with the place where guns are stored in Dallas County for cases
Yes.
like this?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. Are they kept in a separate kind of an armory section for evidence, or is like sort of all the evidence all together?
No, they have a separate place for it, sir.
Okay, can you describe that place for the jury?
Well, they do kind of refer to it as an armory, and they do have it more on the back side of the location, which is referred to as the Baylor property room.
Okay. Y'all don't do maintenance on guns that are kept there, do you?
That's, I would not know how to answer that, sir. I don't know that part.
Okay. You do know generally that it's important to keep evidence in the state that it's found in, right?
I would think so, yes, sir.
Okay, I'll pass the witness.
No further questions. May this officer be released, Your Honor?
Is this
Yes,
witness
Your Honor.
excused?
Yes.
All right, the rule has been invoked. You're not allowed to discuss your testimony
Yes, ma'am.
during the pendency of this trial.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, make sure you leave the microphone behind. And if you all want to make sure
Thank you. Thank you.
the
sir.
evidence is packaged back up. All right, state, call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the state calls David Pendleton.
If you can raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear and affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, just put the microphone on your lapel. And yes, and make sure that you keep your voice up so members of the jury can hear. If you'll state your name for the record and spell your last name, please.
Yes, Your Honor. My name is David Pendleton. That's Pendleton.
All right, state, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Pendleton, can you please just tell the jury what your occupation is?
I'm a firearms examiner at the Bexar County Criminal Investigation Laboratory. Most people just call it the crime lab.
And can you just explain to them what that entails?
On a daily basis, I'm going to examine evidence submitted to the laboratory, usually from criminal cases. That would include things such as firearms, ammunition, and ammunition components, such as fired cartridge cases or fired bullets. And I would try and make a determination if those items were fired in certain firearms.
And how long have you been working at the Bexar County lab?
A little over 19 years.
And is this the Bexar County lab, is it an accredited laboratory?
Yes, sir.
And can you explain to the jury what that means, of what that means to be an accredited laboratory?
Yes, sir. We're accredited by the by ANAB. It stands for ANSI National Accreditation Board. And essentially what accreditation means is that you have standard operating procedures that are accepted within the scientific community, and you follow those procedures.
And I'm assuming that you have to go through certain training education to get to this position. Can you explain to the jury and tell them some of the training and education, if you can?
Yes. As far as education, I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a master's degree in justice policy, both from the University of Texas at San Antonio. I'm also a member of the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners, and I'm certified in the area of firearms identification by that organization. Majority of our training is actually within the laboratory. Takes several years, actually. We also conduct outside annual training when we can attend. And I'm also yearly proficiency tested by an outside agency. And as well as I'm required to maintain a license by the state of Texas.
Thank you. And have you testified as an expert before?
Yes,
Can you tell the jury how many times?
somewhere around 100.
And I guess you do continuing education as in conferences or other type of continuing education to keep up with the times?
Yes, sir. As part of our licensing requirement, we're required to conduct, forgive me, I can't remember if it's 16, 24, or 32 hours, but there's a certain amount of hours that you have to complete within a 2-year period in order to renew your license. And also for certification, which I maintain through the organization that I mentioned, every 5 years, we have to submit to recertify, and it takes quite a number of continuing education credits.
And the techniques and procedures that you use, are they accepted in your field of expertise?
Yes, sir.
Well, can you now just tell the jury, explain to them what a firearm is?
A firearm is essentially a tool, but this tool has a barrel in which a projectile can be launched through the combustion of gases.
And are there different types of firearms?
Yes, sir.
And not to go over how many, there's many, but I'd like to go in particular in the two general categories of handguns. Can you describe to the jury the two different categories, if there is two different categories of firearms for handguns?
Yes, sir. Handguns differ from the other type of firearm, which is either rifle or shotgun, which is shoulder fired. Handguns are meant to be held in one hand. There are two types that we generally refer to. One is a pistol, which is designed to fire ammunition and automatically load another cartridge for firing. The other is a revolver, in which cartridges are manually loaded into a cylinder and fired. That's it.
And I'm going to show you what's been marked state exhibit number 36 and 37. For purposes, can you tell me what recognize those two types of handguns?
Yes, sir. One is a pistol and one is a revolver.
And these two different type of, if there's pictures, but and again, these aren't the weapons associated with this case.
No.
These are those pictures of weapons that signify one's what we call a semi-automatic and one's a revolver.
Yes.
And do you believe that would assist the jurors in what you just described? Your Honor, at this time, for demonstrative purposes, the state would like to offer state exhibit number 36 and 37.
No objection if the court would just give an instruction about what a demonstrative is.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, States Exhibit number 36 and 37 are not alleged to have been involved in this offense at all. It is merely photos from what I can see from the bench, so that this witness can explain to you about weapons. Does everyone understand? So it's not evidence as a part of this case or for the alleged offense. Does everyone understand? All right, then without objection, States Exhibit 36 and 37 are admitted.
Thank you, Judge. May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to show you first what's marked state exhibit number 136. And can you please just describe to the jury what this is?
Yes, that is a revolver.
And this type of handgun, would it be able to, well, one, does, when you fire it, is the shell casing ejected or does it stay in the handgun?
It stays in the handgun. I don't have a pointer, so.
If you would like to step down to the Elmo and you can point from there.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Just make sure you keep your voice up so the jurors can hear.
Yes, Your Honor. So obviously you're looking at a picture photo of a revolver. If you were to describe the components, this area here would be called the frame. This is the barrel, trigger guard, trigger, the grip, sometimes referred to as the butt, hammer. There's a firing pin associated with the hammer, and this is the cylinder. Now, inside the cylinder, there's a series of chambers. And the way a revolver works, some are loaded differently, but just for the purpose of this, if you were to press a button on this, the cylinder would actually open. You would load cartridges into it, and then you would close it. One of these cartridges will be in line with the barrel. When the hammer is cocked by either by single action or double action, when the hammer is cocked, the cylinder will rotate, rotating the next cartridge that's unfired at this point, and it's in line. When the trigger is pulled, the hammer will fall. It'll strike the primer of the cartridge, ignite its gunpowder. The combustion of gases will cause the bullet to enter and exit the barrel, but the cartridge case itself that has been fired will stay in this cylinder. For the next firing or shot or discharge, you would pull the trigger again, or excuse me, pull the trigger or cock the hammer. This will rotate that fired cartridge case out of the way, and now a new unfired cartridge is ready to be fired. And you will just continue that process until you run out of ammunition, or as you desire, I would assume.
Since you're here, and in particular on the revolvers on state exhibit number 36, how do the spent shell casings, how do they exit, or how are they taken out of the revolver?
Depending on the type of revolver, in this case, if you were to open the cylinder, this portion right here, which is called a cylinder, excuse me, the name, the nomenclature is escaping me. I want to say cylinder pin, but so it's a rod. It would open up, and you would actually punch that, and it would ejector rod, and it would cause all of the fired cartridge cases to push out a little bit. Another way to do it is just to turn it over, dump it, they'll fall.
And so in this particular type of handgun, you would have to actually manually extract the spent shell casings or the live rounds for that matter.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's, since you're here, state exhibit number 137, can you describe to the jury what we're looking at here?
This is a semi-automatic pistol. Some of the components are the same, grip or butt, frame overall, trigger guard, trigger. This area is called the slide. Inside, there is a firing pin. Sometimes there may be a hammer or a striker. It's a little bit irrelevant, but there's also the chamber and the barrel located in here.
And in particular, this when this gun is fired, does it retain, like the revolver, the shell casing, or does it expel it?
No, sir.
So it expels the shell casing?
Yes, sir.
And where would that shell casing be expelled from?
Generally, depending on, most firearms will expel to the right of if held properly, of the shooter. The way you would load, there's a magazine that would, I don't have one, but basically you would load the magazine, you would insert the magazine into the grip, and it's under spring pressure under the slide. So you would pull the slide back, and when you do, a cartridge will pop up slightly. So when the slide moves forward, it will strip it from the magazine, load it into the chamber, and put the weapon into battery where it's ready to fire. Once you pull the trigger and the firing pin is released, doing that same action of causing the bullet to exit the barrel, these are gas operated, and some of the gases will cause the slide to return to the rear, and in so doing, it will pull that fired cartridge case out of the chamber by use of what's called an extractor. Just think of it like a little hand or a claw. It will pull it out till it reaches a point and it hits an ejector, which is a post sticking out of the back, and it'll literally hit it and kick it out of the weapon. When the slide comes forward, another cartridge would have popped up, and it loads it for the next shot.
Okay, well, thank you.
Good.
And you can take a seat back up there. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Now, I believe you just mentioned on this, the state exhibit number 137, you mentioned magazine. Can you describe to the jury what that means by magazine?
Most semi-automatic or automatic weapons will have a place to feed the ammunition from, to contain it and also to feed it. So they're generally a box type magazine. There are other types, but generally in semi-automatic pistol, it would be a box magazine. You would load it, and then you would insert it into the weapon to basically load the weapon.
Now, in particular, these weapons, the firearm that we see here in 137 and 136, they're considered, I guess, in the handgun area.
They're handguns, yes, sir.
And are these firearms deadly weapons?
Yes, sir.
And any firearm that is able to expel bullets from it by use of, I guess, the energy that from the cartridge, is that considered a deadly weapon?
Should be, if it can cause serious bodily injury and or death, it would be considered a deadly weapon.
Now, could you explain to the jury, I believe you brought a demonstrative aid up there, and I'd ask, Your Honor, if Mr. Pendleton can use this demonstrative aid, which is brought with him from the lab, but he would like not to enter the evidence, but I'll see if defense has any objections.
I have no objections to him using it and no objections to it not going back to the jury being entered into evidence.
All right, yes, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. And Mr. Pendleton, can you explain one about different calibers?
Yes, sir.
Can you, I know there's probably, I don't know how many, I don't know, but there's probably many. But I mean, in particular with handguns, I think there's also still so many to count, but can you name some of the, I guess, the more common ones?
Some of the common calibers that you would experience would be 380 auto. You might hear 9mm Luger, 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 auto. These are just a few, there's others, but these are probably the most common.
Okay, and then hierarchy. Let me ask, is it 380? Which one's bigger, say a 380 or a 40 caliber?
The 40 caliber is bigger.
And what about a 380 compared to a 357?
The 357 is larger. You know, I think the demonstrative aid might actually assist in this.
And if you can, just describe to the jury what we're discussing right now about the calibers and the shell casings and the ammunition.
So if you were to look at this and think of it as, well, that's a markup of an unfired cartridge. It's okay, some people call it ammo, some people call it brass, some people call it a bullet. For our purposes, this is a cartridge, an unfired cartridge to be exact. And it has 4 components to it. One is the primer. This is where you would strike to cause a small explosion. The second is the case, cartridge case or case body itself. Inside would be gunpowder. And the fourth is the bullet or projectile that we would refer to. When it comes to caliber is referring to the nominal diameter of the bore of a firearm. The ammunition that is fired in it will be designated by measuring the diameter of the bullet. So for example, a 45 caliber bullet would be 45 hundredths of an inch wide, almost a half inch. A 25 auto, which is a caliber, would be almost a quarter of an inch wide. 9mm, although it's in the metric system, it measures the standards around 0.355 hundredths of an inch. So it's in the 30 caliber range. So the larger the denomination in the standard numbers, the larger the caliber. It also refers to, when you're talking about caliber, is the length of a cartridge case. For example, we just mentioned 357. Okay, 357 Magnum is a cartridge, and so is 38 Special. Well, 38 Special and 357, which might surprise you, the bullets are exactly the same. However, the cartridge case length is slightly different. Okay, so that kind of roundabout tells you what a caliber is, and each caliber is designed to be fired in a firearm that's made for that, or to be chambered for that caliber.
Okay, thank you. Now, let me ask you this. For instance, a 380 cartridge, can it be fired in a 9mm handgun?
In some instances, it can, but there would be tell signs of that happening.
And can you tell the jury, what do you mean by telltale signs?
Well, because if you have a 9mm firearm, it's chambered to fit exactly the cartridge case portion of a 9mm. A 380 is much smaller and shorter. So if you were to load one in there, and in some cases you can, when you fire it, we talked about that expansion of gases. Well, that expansion of gases would cause that cartridge case to expand to try to meet that diameter of the bore. So your cartridge cases would display some type of deformation, usually a bulge, or in some cases a split. So it can be done. And I've had cases where it has been. It's just not designed.
And I guess a curiosity here, could a 45 caliber be fired in a 9mm handgun?
No, sir. It's too large.
Because it's the 45 caliber cartridge is too large to get into the 9mm handgun.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me show you. The Mark State Exhibit number 9.
Can you just please take that out of there and view it? And tell me what that is.
Appears to be an unfired cartridge.
And this unfired cartridge, I know that you never reviewed it, did you?
No, sir.
But what size is that?
Appears to be a 380.
380.
Although my lighting here is a little hard. I usually look at this under a microscope. So it does appear to be 380.
Okay, thank you.
Now I'm going to show you what's been marked State Exhibit number 35. Can you please
Tell me if you recognize that package.
I do.
And how do you recognize that package?
Evidence that's submitted to the laboratory by an agency goes through our evidence receiving section and is issued what's called a CIL, or Criminal Investigation Laboratory number. And that number is unique to any evidence that's submitted, corresponds with the agency case number. So I recognize that I wrote that number that was assigned to this evidence on the packaging, a date that I opened it, initials, and item number that I signed this envelope.
So indicating that and what you just testified to, does that mean that you had contact with this object and that you analyzed?
Yes, sir.
Can you please take that object out of the packaging of State Exhibit number 35? and also take it out of that packaging. And this is state exhibit number 35, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, what is state exhibit number 35?
35 is a fire 9mm Luger caliber cartridge case.
And you say 9mm,
Yes, sir.
opposed to state exhibit number 109, which is a live cartridge of a 3.8
Yes,
auto.
Yes.
Is that correct?
yes, sir.
And so there's a marked difference, although the difference is one's a spent shell casing and one is a live cartridge. Is that correct?
Yes, there's other differences as well.
Okay. And well, will you explain to the jury what the other differences are?
The main difference being that they are different calibers. As I mentioned, the cartridge case length. The length of the 9mm cartridge case is obviously much longer than the casing of the 380. And although a projectile is not in the 9mm fire cartridge case, generally they're heavier in weight than the 380. And there's usually a slight difference in diameter.
And so you can visibly see that the shell case of the cell cartridge or casing of exhibit number 35 is at least taller than what the shell casing is for the 380. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm gonna put back in 109 and let's go ahead and put back in 135. If you don't mind, put that back in there.
Now, initially, was this shell casing a state exhibit number 35? Were you the first scientist to review it at the Bear County Lab?
No, sir.
Do you recall who that individual was?
Yes, sir.
And who was that?
Was a Mr. Steven Saucedo.
And at this current time, is Stephen Salcedo still with the office or the lab?
No, sir.
And do you recall how long ago he left?
I want to say end of 2007, probably 2018, actually. It's been some time.
And so do you have any knowledge of when he reviewed and analyzed the shell casing?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury when he made I guess, a final report or a released report?
I can look at my. He actually issued 2 reports, but the first one would have been September 8th of 2017.
And you stated 2 reports.
Yes, sir.
Well, and then what was the date of the second report?
A few days later, on September 22nd, 2017.
Okay, and so let's, in particular, on September 8th, 2017, how do you release I guess that you spoke to me about this, but describe to the jury what you mean by released the report.
Can I hold up a report? They can't see what it says, but I just want to show a watermark.
No objection.
Yes.
So this is a type of report that we would release from the laboratory, and you can see this watermark that says released. Keep that in mind. Generally, the way a examination and a review works at the laboratory is thus. You will examine evidence, you'll take notes, and then you will send that and issue a report, and you'll send that to someone else for review. There's 2 types of reviews. One is a technical review and one is an administrative review. In either one of those reviews, if you find an error that has been made, you send it back to the person who created it and say, hey, can you fix this? They'll say yes, they'll fix it, and they'll send it back to you. And in our computer system, it just goes back and forth, back and forth. Now, during that process, and this is what we do in the normal course of business, instead of release, that watermark will say draft because it hasn't been released. It's just still, there could be changes that can be made. Now, once both those technical administrative reviews are done, the person who wrote the report will release it. Once that report is released and it has this watermark, it's an official copy. So no changes can be made to it. You can't go back and say, oh, I made a mistake or I misspelled something, let's change it. Can't do that any longer because it's an official record. So part of our quality assurance program, that the way to remedy that, if you find an error after the fact, is to create what's called an amended report to fix that error. So that's why there's two reports in this case.
And that's my next question, is that there was two reports in this that were made. Were they both made by Steve Salcedo?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury what the error was on the September 8th, 2017 report?
Yes, sir. When we used our system differently back then than we do now, we had to hand type everything. The portion here where it describes the evidence, in his description of the evidence, he listed it as 140 Smith & Wesson caliber cartridge case, which obviously is incorrect. His notes and everything bear the fact that it is a 9mm. And his results.
I'm going to object to hearsay and confrontation, Your Honor.
All right, that will be sustained.
I'd ask the jury to disregard that last portion of his answer. I'm not objecting to his testimony about the 40 caliber made an error, just the last part about his notes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you just to disregard the last question, last answer.
And Mr. Middleton, so then there was a correction made, or I'm sorry, you used the word amended. And that was at the report on September 22nd, 2017.
Yes.
And on that report, what is, I guess, the results, or what was the line that gave what he tested?
Basically, it was changed from description from 40 caliber to 9mm Luger to reflect it correctly.
Now, when evidence comes over from the evidence room, there are certain numbers associated with that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's the checks and balances of one checking the numbers to make sure they match with the case number, which is the SAPD number also.
Yes, sir.
And in this particular case was the SAPD number 170-89350.
Yes, sir.
Now, after Mr. Salcedo left, for one, do you even know where he is at currently? If you do, if you know.
Honestly, I think he may be working at the NIBIN Correlation Center, which is run by the ATF. I think, I'm not certain. He left the laboratory because he really wanted to pursue a different career in some type of business. And so he went to work for UPS. But I'm not even not sure if he's there. I like Steve, and I just haven't spoken with him sometime.
All right, but thank you. I just try to get some feedback because subsequently you were asked to actually review the shell casing in this case. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that state exhibit number 35, the shell casing in this particular case, did you analyze that shell casing?
I did, yes, sir.
And with your findings, what did you find that shell casing to be?
A 9mm Luger cartridge case.
And with that particular shell casing, can I ask, how do you review it and what do you look for?
Well, there was additional evidence that was submitted with this. I don't know if I can.
Well, I'm going to go into that, but I mean,
Well,
initially, what do you do with the shell casing? If you just receive a shell casing, sort of like Steve Salcedo, what do you do with it?
the first thing I'm going to notate, obviously, is caliber, and then I'm going to document its class characteristics. It'd be the shape of the firing pin, maybe the structure of the breech face. In some cases, those class characteristics can kind of give us an indication of what type of firearm fired it, because class characteristics belong to a group of firearms. For example, a certain make and model of firearm may exhibit the exact same class characteristics. And so if I had a cartridge case and it had certain attributes that were attributable to, say, a Glock pistol, I could say, oh, this is a fired cartridge case and it was possibly fired in a Glock pistol. In this case, it was kind of generic, so I can basically just say I couldn't tell you what make or model it was fired in.
Thank you. And as you said earlier, that if this shell casing was maybe fired in a caliber up from it, did you notate anything about the any expansion of the shell casing itself or any damage to it?
No, it seemed to be fine.
And then you stated about other evidence, and I'm going to show you what's marked state exhibit number 135. State exhibit number 135. Can you let me know, one, is this a firearm in a magazine that you analyzed?
Yes, sir.
And can you just read off the serial number to that?
Yes, sir. It's LEJ 9244.
Thank you. Now, since I have this handgun in front of you and the magazine, can you hold this magazine, hold a firearm and show the jury how you would load a magazine into that firearm?
As I mentioned earlier about this loading into the magazine under spring tension, but it has these lips on the end. So when the cartridge goes into it, underneath those lips, the first one, it'll catch it. And you can continue to load cartridges under this spring until it reaches capacity, which in this case is a total of 8. You would then insert it into the magazine, like this. You would pull the slide back. That cartridge will pop up. When the slide comes forward, it will load. Now, if you can notice this sticking out just a little bit, it means that even though this is a Smith & Wesson magazine, either it wasn't made for this particular model, or there's more than likely an additional component that goes around this butt area for gripping. But it does see, it does work.
And you stated that it's sticking out just a little bit at the end, but was this the magazine? Did you use this magazine when you test fired the firearm?
Yes, sir.
And so it was able to be used.
Yes, sir.
And tell the jury what you mean by test firing the firearm.
When we do a test fire examination, I'm going to go through a series of checks. First, I'm going to document the obvious, the make, the model, the serial number. I'm going to check what type of safety features it has and if they are working, and if it's safe to fire. If it is safe to fire, then I will test fire the weapon twice, either in the range or into a water tank, and recover what we will call our tests or our known standards. We know where they came from because we fired them from the weapon.
Thank you. And in this particular situation, you stated that you did test this firearm.
Yes, sir.
And were you able to obtain the shell casing that was fired from it?
Yes, sir.
I'll show you what's marked state exhibit number 138. And can you please describe to the jury, one, how you would, well, what do you look for on the shell casings to compare shell casings to each other?
The first thing we're going to look for are the class characteristics. These are general. As I said before, class characteristics can belong to a group. So the same 40 Smith & Wesson caliber Glock pistol and the same model number will exhibit, obviously, the caliber is a class characteristic. The shape of the firing pin, is it circle, is it rectangular, is it elliptical? That's a class characteristic. Characteristics of the breech face Are there parallel lines on from the cutting on the breech face? From a bullet standpoint, you would think class characteristics are things such as the caliber, obviously, but also things such as the landing groove impressions that are left on the bullet. How many of them? Are there 6? Are there 5? Are there 7? Do they twist to the left? Do they twist to the right? These are left by the rifle of the barrel. These are class characteristics. If these are different, then from anything we're comparing as question, then we can make the determination these aren't the same. If, however, they are the same, and because class characteristics can share the same group, then we would move into what's called individual characteristics. And these are the fine markings that are left in the firing process of the firearm that are left on the softer metals of fired bullets and cartridge cases. We would first test the weapon, take those 2 tests, and we would use what's called a comparison microscope, which is essentially 2 microscopes that I can view items side by side through one set of eyepieces. I will look on those tests to see if I see markings that are individual that are reproducing from test to test. And if I can find those and say that they are sufficient agreement, then I will see if any questioned evidence have those same individual markings. If there is sufficient agreement, then I can make a determination whether or not that item was fired from this particular firearm.
Thank you. And so I guess at the end, you're saying that if a shell casing is fired from any firearm, it would leave some unique characteristics associated with that firearm.
Generally, not always, but generally.
Okay. And in this particular case, reviewing the shell casing that was fired from the test fire that you did with this firearm, were you able to compare that shell casing with the shell casing that was entered into evidence on this case in state exhibit number 35?
Yes, sir.
And can you tell the jury whether these 2 shell casings, were they fired from the same weapon?
They were not fired from. The question that evidence cartridge case that was submitted was not fired in the firearm submitted.
And is that because of the unique characteristics that you mentioned earlier?
Actually, not individual characteristics. This is it was an exclusion based on class characteristics. So we didn't even need to get to the individual portion. This exclusion was based on the class. They didn't share the same class characteristics.
And what do you mean by that in class?
Although they, for example, they share the same caliber, which is a class characteristic, and that's okay. But the shape of their firing pin and the shape of the aperture is the hole which the firing pin sticks out of from the slide. They were markedly different, knowing that they did not exhibit the same class characteristics.
And on state exhibit number 138, is that a photo that was taken by you when you examined these shell casings from the top?
Yes, sir.
And the one on the left is which one is that?
The one on the left is the cartridge case from the scene.
And then the one to the right,
That is a test from this firearm.
that you made the test, the one on the right.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I'd ask the interstate exhibit number 138 there, the opportunity to defense for any objections.
No objection.
State's exhibit number 138 is admitted without objection.
May I publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
I want to show the jury state exhibit number 138.
And you may
And-
step down if,
Oh, I'm gonna point.
okay, all right.
Thank you.
I don't know if he wants to get his steps in today, so. What I'm pointing out right now on this overhead is, it's on my right. And which shell casing is this?
That would be one of the tests from the fire, from the pistol.
That you made the test fire?
Yes, sir.
And this one on the left is the one that was, the shell casing that was entered into evidence on this case?
Yes.
Okay. And you know what, actually, Judge, I'm gonna ask him to step down and come down here if you don't mind,
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Pilton. On state exhibit number 138, can you point out what we're looking at and describe to the jury what the differences you stated earlier on the stand?
If I may, can I get my.
Oh, sure.
demonstrative see it easier.
So we spoke about this demonstrative yesterday in the earlier in the primer. The area we're looking at here is firing and impression. This is where the firing pin is located. This back area where it sits flat in the firearm is called the breech face area. There can be a negative impression of the breech face area, negative impression of the firing pin impression, and some other areas. This is the area. It's not clear.
And so please describe to the jury, it's that top, that flat portion round. Can you please tell the jury what we're looking at here?
So this is the firing pin impression of the test, and this is the firing pin impression of the questioned. All this area back here is the breech face area. Now, if you notice, there's an area, just think of it as puffy scrapes like this, also around this one. What you're looking at is, okay, that firing pin sticks through the hole in the breech face. This primer is much softer metal. So when it strikes it and that little explosion happens, you're going to have some of that metal filter back into the crevice around the firing pin. Does that make sense? Okay. So now when it gets extracted and ejected, that metal is still in those crevices around the firing pin, and it's going to go at an angle and get kicked out of the firearm, and it's going to make the scraping motions. So that is all of this scraping motions, or these striations that you're seeing on this breech face, which is important because this is also a class difference.
Thank you. Can you take a seat back up there? Thank you, sir. So, in your opinion, these two shell casings, were they fired from the same weapon?
No, sir.
Thank you. We'll pass the witness.
Defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Pendleton. How are you?
Afternoon, I'm fine, sir. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions about sort of the paper chase here. So bear with me because I want you to try and help me understand a couple of things.
Yes.
Back in 2017, when I believe you said it was Mr. Saucedo was working at the laboratory, is back when this shell casing was first received for your for consideration by your lab, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I'm gonna approach real quick. Can you show me the cartridge casing that was originally received back in 2017?
Yes, sir.
So, gosh, you really do need a microscope, don't you?
Yes, sir. And plus the lighting is bad.
But it says at the top, Blazer and then 9mm Luger.
Yes.
Blazer is the brand that manufactures this round. Correct?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay. So this shell casing was recovered at a crime scene and sent over to the laboratory. Is that fair, accurate?
Yes, sir.
What happened? And all of that occurred back in 2017 timeframe, correct?
Yes, sir.
And have you looked at the chain of custody from when it was first collected at the scene until when you finally received it?
No, sir. The way it works for us, the chain of custody, the submitting agency will submit it to the laboratory to our evidence receiving section. They will submit a request for analysis. In this case, examine this cartridge case. And from there, it follows an internal chain of custody. So I will go check this out from evidence receiving well, I did.
And let me just stop you right there. When you say internal, do you mean internal to your laboratory?
Yes.
Not so separate and apart from the police department's chain of custody?
Yes, sir.
That's what you mean by internal?
Yes.
Okay. Continue. I didn't mean that.
That's okay. So I will take it to my laboratory section, conduct analysis, do a report, package the evidence when I'm done, and return it to the evidence receiving section, at which time the agency will send someone to collect it.
and take it back to their property.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, that's what you do normally. You can't obviously speak for what Mr. Saucedo did. You weren't looking at this cartridge back in 2017, right?
I did not look at the cartridge, but it's the same evidence.
Okay, well, I'm just asking, back then in 2017, what Mr. Saucedo did with the evidence, you're generalizing now when you talk about the procedures, right?
Well, that procedure was still the same. It has been for twice.
Okay, right, that's what you're
Yeah.
supposed to do, right?
Exactly, yes, but I
As to
can't
whether it
say.
was done.
Excuse me,
Yes.
if you all could not talk over each other because the court reporter has to type down everything that everyone's saying.
Sorry, Your Honor.
As to what was specifically done here with Mr. Saucedo, were not an eyewitness to what Mr. Saucedo did.
Yes.
Okay, so, the casing in question, from what you can tell, looking at Mr. Saucedo's work, it's a generic brand of ammunition, and the markings on it are fairly standard in par for the course for a 9mm handgun, right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
But at the time in 2017, there was nothing telegraphed specifically, this was shot out of a Glock, or this was shot out of a Smith & Wesson, or anything else.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. And so it gets entered into a database, right?
I believe the police department does that.
Okay, what does the database like entail? I mean, in my mind, when you talk about a database, I'm thinking like microscope slides that, AI can track and pinpoint and all the rest, but is that what you mean by a database?
Yes, what they refer to, and I don't see any markings as to whether or not it was actually entered, but they may not have done that at the time. But basically, it's called the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. The National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, or NIBIN. And think of it like a fingerprint system for fired cartridge cases. So digitally, these markings that we were looking at, it's going to use some algorithms and shapes to see if it can find potential associations. Can't be used for identification purposes because you need a microscope and a trained person to do that. But it can give you leads to possible associations, and that's what the system is.
Okay, and you can't say specifically whether that was done for this shell casing or not.
No.
Okay, but from your review of this file that there was no gun to compare it to for a long time.
Yes, sir.
Like 7 years, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I'm gonna show you some things I'd like you to help me understand what they are. Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
Sorry.
That's okay. All right. It's the court's understanding that a juror needs a break. I'm sorry, I didn't see you signal. Remember my previous instructions, and I will have you all back here. Is 4:55 enough time for everyone? All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors.
And you're still under oath?
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, Mr. Pendleton, so a moment ago, we were talking about how that 9mm shell casing arrived at the laboratory back in 2017.
Yes,
And then there was a long period of time where there wasn't a gun in your laboratory to match up with that, right?
yes, sir.
And you were asked to test a firearm against that shell casing in what, the late summer, early fall of 2024, correct?
Very recent. Yes, around probably a little before, but my report is issued on September 12th of 2024, so probably wouldn't have been too long.
Okay, fair enough.
Oh, August.
I don't know what this is, but I want it.
Okay, because this one.
Somewhere like this.
Okay, it's also that he can recognize.
Yeah, he doesn't.
Okay.
Okay. I want you to help me kind of just understand what I'm looking at here and what you can tell me about it. I'm going to first show you defendants 11. And if you could just take a look at all the pages of 11 and tell me what that is, if it's anything, and if you recognize it.
Yes, sir. I can't see the actual numbers of. It looks like page printouts from our old system from 2017. But yes, I recognize them.
Oh, okay, so when you talk about page printouts from your old system, there are a series of sort of drop-down menus like you would fill in a PDF with.
Yes,
Okay, so there would be options to click underneath all of those things.
yes, sir.
So someone has printed that screen as to what was entered with respect to this case, this one fired 9mm Luger caliber cartridge case.
Yes.
Okay. Now on page, and you reviewed these materials when you were preparing your report?
No, because these are the older, I believe these look like they're from the previous version of what I'm using now.
Okay.
That's why I say I can't see the numbers or dates, so I don't know, is this mine?
If you can look there, does that indicate to you that it might have been from 2017?
The date started, yes, it does look like it's 2017 date started, so this is like.
Okay, so this would have been the stuff from the original work that Mr. Saucedo did.
Yes, and to be fair, at that time, this system, we really didn't utilize that portion as much. It was more the handwritten at that time that he would use.
Okay, so I'm going to call your attention to page 3 of defendants 11, and I want you to talk to me about this stuff here. This is Mr. Saucedo's notes about the cartridge casing, right?
Mm-hmm. It appears to be, yes, sir.
Okay, but like the report that you mentioned, he's indicated that it's a 40 Smith & Wesson.
Yes, he did.
On that document,
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, he did.
Okay, and that would be in keeping with what I'll show you as defendants 14, which was the released report that you were referencing earlier.
Yes.
Where he also states that it's a 40 caliber Smith & Wesson.
Yes. Correct.
Okay, and you were telling me a moment ago that in the remarks section of defendant 14, where it says these items will be returned to the evidence receiving section, that your policy has been updated.
Yes, sir.
What's changed now?
If an amended report were to be issued today, it would still say at the top of the report, this is an amended report, but at the bottom in the remarks section, it would have some type of notation that would say, this report has been amended to change this to this, and it replaces the report of the previous one, whatever that date would be, something to that.
So explaining and referencing the prior report that's being changed.
Yes, sir.
And that would just be so that there's no confusion about whether we're looking at the same piece of evidence.
Correct, yes, sir.
Just to be clear, when it says here, there's a 1-1 and it says one fired 40 Smith & Wesson caliber cartridge case, and then E1. 1-1 and E1, are those your internal numbering systems for the evidence?
The 1-1 is the our numbers. The E1 would be what would be on that's the agency number.
Okay, and you're not aware of how the agency does its numbering system or whether there are any other E1s or anything else?
Absolutely no, sir.
Okay. Now, ultimately, I'm going to show you defendants 13. These are your notes from last year. Is that right?
Looks like it, yes, sir.
Okay, so this would be your work without Mr. Saucedo's involvement.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You did go back and look at Mr. Saucedo's involvement, right?
Yes.
Did it inform your opinion in any way?
No.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that this particular shell casing that we were discussing here, which is in, yes, that states. Jason, what the 9 from the scene is which evidence number? Okay, about 35. There we go. So states 35 is the original shell case.
Yes.
Okay. And then states 109. Okay, no, I'm sorry. This is a 380 auto bullet, right?
Correct. Unfired cartridge, yes.
Your understanding was this was found somewhere in conjunction with the case?
I assume I've never seen it before.
Okay. Now, Mr. Garahand asked you if you could fire a 380 auto in a 9mm gun, gave that explanation. Right?
Yes.
What about the other way around?
Can a 9mm be fired in a 380?
Right.
No, sir.
That's not possible.
No, sir. It's too large and too long, so it won't fit into the chamber.
Okay. So if somebody has a 380 pistol and they tried to load a 9mm bullet into it to shoot it, what would happen?
It would more than likely jam. If it would even fit in the magazine. If it did, you try to cycle it, it would basically lock up.
Okay. Now, when were you made aware that there was a gun that that needed to be compared to that 9mm shell casing in states 35?
I don't have the submission form, but normally on reports, we put when it was submitted. So as of August 28th of 2024, so probably about a month, a little less than a month
Okay.
before I issued the report.
And do you know anything about the story of that gun that you were asked to compare to the shell casing? In other words, how it arrived at your laboratory?
I know a little now after the fact, after speaking with Mr. Garahand for pretrial, but before that, no, I did not.
Okay. Now, so at the time that you were doing the comparison, you were unaware of anything other than just, here's a 9mm pistol, it's a Smith & Wesson. We're asking you, can you compare that to a shell casing we recovered at a crime scene?
Believe so. I can't say for certain if I had maybe got an email to work the case and that information. I'm not absolutely certain, but I don't believe so.
Fair to say, there's nothing in your notes or your work about the analysis or the comparisons that you did where you listed that as a factor that would have impacted your analysis?
No, of course. I think I might have notated there was something about Dallas PD or something.
So you've since come to learn that the gun was in Dallas for some time and then came to San Antonio for some time, but never just got linked up with this case or the shell casing until not even a year ago.
Yes.
Okay. So when you did your analysis, you took was it the same brand of ammunition?
No. No. Just forgive me, these computer printouts that are a little bit harder to read than when they're on the screen. Actually, yes, I did use the same brand of ammunition,
which is Blazer,
Blazer, yes, sir.
Blazer 9mm Luger ammunition.
Yes.
Okay. So, and you did that to just try and eliminate as many variables as you can from your analysis, right?
Yes,
Because the way that a firing pin indents, say, a Winchester 9mm round might be different than the way it impacts a Blazer round.
yes, there can be very slight variations, but there can be variations. So just to alleviate that, when possible, if we have our own ammunition collection, we prefer to use ammunition that from our reference that is as similar or close to as possible to any questioned evidence. That does not mean that if they submitted unfired evidence and I couldn't use it, we just prefer to use our own ammunition because we know there's no previous markings on it.
Okay. And so we understand from that idea that there are variables that can affect our ability to say things with a lot of certainty about how a primer is indented by a firing pin.
Yes.
Okay. And so you ruled out this gun as being the source of that spent shell casing based on what you call class characteristics, right?
Yes.
So no microscopes are involved in this kind of work.
Well, there is microscopes involved, but they're just not a high power, and we're not comparing individual comparisons.
Sure, you're like we were having trouble reading the word
Yes.
Blazer on that.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
a microscope could help with that kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
That's the level of magnification we're talking about.
Yes, as a matter of fact, if you notice the photo, it's still on the screen. It says micro B. That stands for microscope B. That's the microscope that I use. And F14X means it's 14 times.
Okay, gotcha. So, in terms of the variables that can affect the primer indentation, I mean, you're familiar with guns. You've been out to a range and fired multiple rounds through a gun, I'm sure, many times.
Yes.
And you've probably experienced the frustration any gun user has experienced where you buy a brand new box of ammunition and a round doesn't go off.
Yes.
So there are variabilities in the manufacture of guns,
Okay.
of ammunition, sorry.
There can be, yes.
And that could include how the primer is seated, or whether the primer has been exposed to corrosion before it got put in the box, or
Yes, sir.
probably a lot of other things.
Yes.
Okay. And so when you're talking about ruling things out on a class level, you said that caliber is one possible way to rule it out on a class level.
Yes.
Okay. So like, for example, if we have a 9mm cartridge, or I'm sorry, we had a 40 caliber cartridge casing and a 9mm pistol, you don't have to do any additional work to say that on a class level, that's not possible. That's not the gun that fired the cartridge.
Yes.
Okay. But you said that also things like primer could be, right? A class of characteristics.
So the firing pin shape and the aperture shape is what I was referring to. Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, like, for example, some guns are manufactured in such a way that they leave a distinct signature on their firing pin, right?
Yes, so there are some that if you were to see that firing pin, because you're accustomed to seeing certain makes and models, you test fire, you look at the test. There are times where you can pick up a cartridge case and go, oh, that's from this type of gun.
But not all guns are that way, right?
No. And actually, most of them aren't.
Most of them aren't. In fact, some gun manufacturers have been criticized publicly and in lawsuits because they don't make their firing pins more distinct, right?
There's a debate about that, yes, sir.
Okay. And I mean, part of that debate goes to just generally the idea of using a firing pin indentation like a fingerprint, right? There's some criticism of that.
In that respect of, probably what you're referring to is micro stamping, the imprint. What they're referring to is putting a serial number very microscopically on the firing pin. So if it were to strike a object, you would have that serial number and say, oh, well, this was fired in that gun. It's a little more complicated than that. And also they don't, part of that debate, which I don't really want to get into the debate, but part of that is they don't last very long.
Understood. So, okay, when we're talking about we're talking about a mechanical tool. A gun is a mechanical tool, right?
Yes, sir.
And all of the parts of a gun are working against each other and principles like friction and so forth, because it's metal rubbing up against metal to make this thing work.
Yes, sir. Correct.
And so guns have ordinary wear and tear as a consequence of that, right?
Yes, sir.
If you take a shotgun and you open it up for the first time out of the box, it's probably very stiff and difficult to open. But if you've been shooting it for 40 years, it could just almost fall open with a tap of the hammer, right?
Yes, and that wear and tear will also add to the individual accident, what we call accidental marks. Yes, sir.
And so as a gun wears, that can impact how the firing pin works, correct?
Potentially, yes, sir.
Okay, and then other things might impact how a firing pin works on a specific occasion, like the gun shot upside down or sideways or at an unusual angle other than what a marksman normally goes for, right?
Potentially, yes, sir.
If a gun was dropped or damaged in some way, that could also impact how the firing pin works.
Good, yes, sir.
As far as corrosion is concerned, these are, again, metal objects, right? I mean, apart from what, the grip, everything on that gun is metallic in some way.
Yes, they're usually stainless steel. Yes.
And so a gun owner has to take care of the gun, oil it, lubricate it, remove powder and other debris on a routine basis, or else the gun might start to rust or jam, right?
It depends, maybe not necessarily rust so much, but continued dirt and debris and stuff may make it operate not properly, yes.
And certain materials may start to cling to aspects of the gun because there's oil and grease on it, dirt, grime, gritty material, sand, those kinds of things could get in it, right?
Yes, sir.
And so if something has been sitting for a very long time and has not been cleaned or maintained, you would expect to see some kind of problem with the gun generally, right?
Depends on the environment.
Okay.
If it's just sitting in a drawer, I doubt any change is going to take place.
And to be fair, you don't know a lot about the story of this gun and where it's been.
No, sir.
Okay. And that was not something that was reported to you when you did your analysis.
No, sir.
Okay. And those kinds of issues related to corrosion or grime or issues with that could affect the firing pin's operation.
They could, but it's also one of, like you spoke of, the many variables. Those are also variables that we consider in parts of our examination.
Okay. So am I to understand that when you're looking at states 138, is it on the?
Yes, sir. Yes.
When you're looking at 138, the thing that you discussed at length with Mr. Garahan was the breech face impression, which is the sort of broader ring around the really fine pointed indentation on the primer, right?
Yes.
The fact that the one on the right seems to have a larger gouge dug out of it on the right, you didn't seem to mention that. That doesn't seem to be a major point of interest for you.
No, it is. It's actually clear. It would be easy to show the actual firing pin of the weapon to explain why there is a unique shape to the test that isn't being shown.
Okay. Did you do any disassembly of this gun?
No, sir.
Okay. So that wasn't something that you notated in your report?
No, sir.
Okay. Were you aware that the gun had been entered into the database up in Dallas?
Possibly. I think there was some notation on the paperwork, possibly. I can't say yes or no, but it is a possibility, yes, sir.
And that didn't play a role in your analysis at all?
No, sir.
For them to have made that entry in the database, they would have had to fire an exemplar shell themselves
Yes.
up in Dallas, right?
Yes, sir. In order to enter a cartridge into the, well, if it for the gun, they would test fire. Yes, sir.
Okay. And you have not seen that exemplar spent shell case?
No, sir.
Okay. And you didn't review the notes that were in the database about that spent shell casing in your analysis? You based it off the exemplar you made firing the gun in your laboratory?
Correct. Yes, sir.
in a case where there's this much time between when a gun is alleged to have been fired, when the gun was seized, and when the gun finally got tested, would it be helpful scientifically to see what an exemplar taken from the gun earlier in time, closer to the time of the shooting, would reveal?
Not necessarily, especially not in this case, no, sir.
Well, you say not necessarily, but it would be a variable, right?
Potentially, the changes to firearms have been shown study after study to be very minimal over time, lacking some form of forced change.
But you're aware that there are also studies that have said that analysis based on primer indentation are unreliable because they're difficult to repeat, right?
Yes, sir.
So, your field isn't without some scientific criticism.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay. I'll pass the witness.
State,
Yeah, Your Honor.
yes.
Mr. Pendleton, you were, when Mr. Hunter was asking you a question about the indention and everything, the firing pin, you stated that you could show with that particular firearm, I guess, a unique characteristic of this firearm. Can you explain that to the jury?
Yes, with the Smith & Wesson M&P, I mentioned earlier that aperture, that circle that the firing pin sticks out of. In addition to that, there is call it a scoop or a piece of metal that is taken away from the breech face area around it, or in a portion of it. And that is put there by Smith & Wesson, they claim, to help assist in debris when you fire the weapon on fired powers and stuff to not collect. Gives it an escape route, so to speak. And when they put that there, when you fire a cartridge case into it, when I mentioned earlier, the softer primer kind of flows back into the crevice area. Well, it also fills in that area. I'm trying to find a hard word to explain it, but it basically makes this shape here on the end, if you can see what I'm seeing. And that tells me that this cartridge case, and I know that for a fact because I fired it from that gun, this is a test, was fired a make and model type of Smith & Wesson. There's also a Glock that can have similar distinction because they do the same manufacturing technique, but that is not on the questioned evidence. Another change here, and I failed to mention it early, I apologize, but the firing pin itself, if you were to look at it from a profile, the test is what we call a hemispherical. Think of a globe, you cut it in half, it'll look like a bowl. That's the tip of the firing pin. Think of it like a bowl shape. Whereas the questioned one has more of a flattened surface. That's what we call a circular firing pin. It's a little tapered on the edges, but the base of it is more flattened. So these are class characteristics that are different from each other.
And with this particular weapon, did you notate any corrosion or any other variables that Mr. Hunter had mentioned?
No, sir.
Thank you. We'll pass the witness.
Very briefly. You didn't notate that there wasn't corrosion either. And you mentioned that there are certain aspects of this manufacturer's breech face that are significant to you, but you don't notate those in your report either, correct?
Well, actually I do, but you have to be an examiner understanding the notations. Like if you look at my notations, I'd say the firing pin type. I have to look at my notes, but I'd more likely call it a teardrop because we generally see that shape, and that's kind of the shape that examiners have called it. Personally, I think it looks more like a comet, but we go with teardrop. Whereas this other one, I would notate that it's circular. Also with the firing pin impression, in my notes, you will notice that it will say M&P because that's the type of firing pin impression that I typically see in M&P. Whereas this other one, the notation for it would say circular. So it is notated, but it's very difficult to understand what those notes mean unless you're accustomed to writing those notes.
Okay, Now, you mentioned that it's a teardrop shape on the right-handed breech face, right?
Yes.
Now, on the left-handed one, that is the one that was collected as questioned evidence. There's also more of a cutout, if you will, or an indentation trailing off to the right in the same direction as on the 2024 test, right?
Those actually are not from that type. That's actually part of the firing pin. It's called the firing pin drag. And they don't always have to be the same, even from make and model, same make and model. And what's happening is when the firing pin strikes the primer, it's going to stay stuck inside it a little bit. And so when it's getting kicked out of the weapon, it's going to kind of scrape its way out of there. And it leaves this marking here and this marking here on this one. So it's called firing pin drag.
So your belief is that the shell casing on the left is exhibiting firing pin drag, and the shell casing on the right is exhibiting a different shaped firing pin? Is that
No, they are both exhibiting firing pin drag. They are, however, the firing pins themselves exhibit different class characteristics.
Okay, well, I understand they exhibit different class characteristics, but you were specifically calling our attention to
Yes,
that
they're both
aspect of it. They both have drag.
They both have drag, yes, sir.
Okay, so the degree that how many total class characteristics are you supposed to go through in doing a comparison?
Honestly, there's no set number. No one's ever asked that, but generally it's the caliber, the shape of the firing pin, and characteristics of the breech face.
So
there's a number of different types of shapes to look for on the breech face, but
so the things that you believe would fall into that category of class characteristic may differ from another examiner.
no.
Okay, but there's no set number of things that could be a class characteristic.
There's not a set number, but I would, in other words, another examiner would not look at this and say that that's not a class characteristic.
Okay, well, it sounds like it's a fairly broad definition, right? Would you agree? The idea of class characteristics?
It obviously, to be fair, it depends on what the item of evidence is to be looking at to consider. Yes, sir.
Okay, and fundamentally at its core, because these are observations that aren't using extremely high magnification examination, there is a degree to which the training and experience of the examiner plays a role.
Absolutely. And to be fair, everything that I do is subjective, meaning that's my opinion.
Ask the witness.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Excused by the state, Your Honor.
Excused by the defense.
All right, the rule has been invoked. You're not allowed to discuss your testimony with anyone during the pendency of this trial. Thank you. All right, and state, is that your last witness for today?
Yes, it is, Your Honor.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have you back here tomorrow at 9:15. I know previously I said 9 o'clock, but I want to say 9:15 to make sure that everyone has a chance to park. We can go off the record. And remember previously what I told you about the number of jurors who will be coming up. The same number of jurors when you all were brought up are going to be the same number of jurors for tomorrow. All right. And remember my previous instructions. Do not do any investigation. Do not even think about this case outside this outside this courtroom. Does everyone understand? Do not deliberate. Do not talk about it. Everything that you need to know about this case come from inside the courtroom. All right. All right. And I don't think there's any street closures, but you can Google that and check that to make sure that there are no more street closures downtown. I think, well, I know the basketball game is done. I don't know if people are still here for that, but I don't know of any other closures. So before you leave, you may want to check to be sure. All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors. All right, everyone, please be seated. 9:15.
Thank you.
You're welcome.